right, thanks everyone. We are on a work session, April 28th. Our mayor is having some technical problems. She'll be joining us shortly. Please join me to the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
To the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. While we wait for our mayor, is any trustees announcements that we would like to kick this off?
I can start. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. I was the liaison to the 2020 census, and we got some initial data coming back. We haven't gotten the full results back yet, so we don't know how our population has changed in Ossining specifically. What we do know is that there are states in the Northeast that have had population decreases, and also in California, and then those increases you're seeing in states like Texas and Arizona, others down south. And so the big news from that is that New York is losing a congressional seat as a result. States like Texas are gaining at least one. Texas is actually gaining more than one. And so what that may mean for us is a redrawing of the district lines so that current congressional representatives may have to run against each other, or that may change the makeup of certain congressional districts. So more to come there, but the big trend is that folks are leaving states in the Northeast and moving down south. And so that is interesting because in our community, one of the things that we often talk about is a number of people that want to come to Ossining. That's because Ossining is amazing. And it's also a trend that we're maybe not seeing in other parts of the state. And so there's, I think, some benefits and drawbacks. But one of the things is for communities that have lost a lot of people, it's hard to get that energy back, because once people leave, it's hard to bring them back. So something to consider as we look at the future of our village. And that's it for me tonight.
Is anyone else with announcements?
I have a couple things. The River Keeper sweep is on Saturday, and that is where people come together and help clean up the river and tributaries. I'm not sure if there's still time to sign up, but there are 5 locations around Ossining. So you can go to Green Ossining to see if there's any slots open anywhere. If you want to participate, it's actually a lot of fun. Makes you feel good, makes the river look good, makes Ossining look good. The other thing is, and this is also environmental, people don't realize that tag sales are actually very green because you're recycling items, you're not throwing away, you're reusing and adapting. And so the Green Ossining community-wide tag sale is Saturday. I will be participating. I'll have several people in my yard with me, so come buy my stuff. You can get a map at greenossining.org. There are places all over town that households that are selling stuff, and it's going to be nice weather. Finally, no rain, so it should be a really fun day.
Thank you, Nena, and our mayor is back. So
technical
difficulties.
Technical difficulties on my really fun computer that I was using earlier today, and I think, anyway, it doesn't matter. We did the pledge, I assume, and I'm assuming that we're in announcements now. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, Mayor.
Did everybody get a chance to?
Not yet. Omar went, Dana went. I'm not sure if Bob has anything, but I do have something to piggyback on Omar, but I'll wait for Bob to go.
I will allow you to piggyback. I don't have anything.
Thanks, Bob. So I want to piggyback on that one. So we had, I'm not sure if we had sort of like an informal meeting yesterday with Senator Elisha, that is part of a district here. And I want to just piggyback on something that my colleague Omar said, and Karen or the mayor, please correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Yes, it's unfortunately that we are losing a seat on that one, but it was interesting that he said, my recollection was that we actually, the population in New York increased, believe it or not. And that's something that I'd be curious to see what areas in New York State the increase was of population, because that will tell you, and I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say 800,000 people.
Just over 800, like 864,000,
Yeah,
something like
like
that.
that.
It was a little surprising.
Yeah, so it was surprising to see that, you know, and we lost, unfortunately, we lost that seat by 200. It was less than 300. How much was it?
89 votes.
89 votes.
89.
89 votes. So it was less than 100 votes that we lost that seat, which was unfortunately overall a big picture. You know, is a shame that happened, unfortunately. But yeah, that was you know, I will follow up with Senator Elijah in regards to see if we can get maybe Omar, you'll be able to get some more data in regards to what does that mean, especially for Austin, because I remember when I first got elected, one of the first things that we did, we were coming off from the census, and that's what the adjustments of different districts happened. And we at the time, as a board, the mayor at that time, Bill Hanauer, sent a letter on behalf of the board to the state in regards to us keeping, you know, a center on this side of the river in a way. And you know, that didn't happen, obviously. And you know, I'll be curious to see what are the next steps on Albany, and what does that look like. So we'll keep, I guess, the population on the village and the town of Austin informed, and as we do a little more homework in our end and see what that looks like in the next year or so. So, but that's it. That's all I have, Mayor.
Great, thank you. I have a couple. I'm going to start. We did meet. It was open to, I sent it to the board. It wasn't a lot of notice. I think that they're having their town hall meeting actually about an hour ago. And he'll have more sort of town meetings. This topic was the budget. So the budget is a 212, billion. I mean, at the end of the day, Austin is going to benefit from the school aid to roads to ADA to there were pieces in the budget about rent support for people who have found themselves unable to maybe meet their rent obligations, both small businesses and individuals. So these are good things. It just goes to show you, I think last year, our friend Omar Lopez was pushing at every meeting to do the census. We lost a congressional seat because 89 people didn't fill out census forms, basically. Didn't matter how you filled them out, you had to fill them out. And out of a state with over 20 million people, if you do the math, it's unfortunate, but it just shows how important filling out the census is, and we say that all the time. Good news is, though, the two states that had the most movement, I think, migration in, were Texas and Florida. So that's something that going through the budget is going to be a big deal this year. I'm sorry, but Manager Diatori was also on the call, as was Supervisor Levenberg. And we've got, like, all of your representatives are working to make sure we comb through the budget and make sure that our roads, our sewage, everything, water, and there's environmental money, there's money for people with special needs, there's money in undocumented, there's money to supplement the federal money. So I think one of the comments made, it's a little bit out of my range of thinking. I think local, I stay in my lane. But what Assemblywoman and the Senator said is the budget year started in a very bad place and ended up in a very good place, especially for places like Austin. So it's a big deal. We should be like, fireworks. It's a big deal. So I count on the staff to actually follow up and make sure, which they will, to look at all the budgets. That's my segue to also just let folks know, especially because it's a work session. I actually, at this point, I believe, except with the small but powerful legal team and the small but powerful finance team, I've actually taken the opportunity to educate myself and introduce myself, but also meet with every department, including the police department, in the village of Ossining. I actually thought that was what mayors were supposed to do. I didn't realize actually that it wasn't. I have a corporate background. I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. I've been learning a lot about how staff works, some of their issues, communications with elected officials. A reminder to the public who's listening to this, many of our staff people are also residents in the village. Really enlightening conversation. Super happy to be a mayor of this community. Super happy to have met some staff members that I just never really see. With or without the pandemic, they are the worker bees, and I just don't get to see them. You know, they don't directly work for me. So it was really enlightening. I am going to meet again with 2 more groups because we didn't get through the hour, and we're going to reschedule that. So I just thought people should know that, because this is a work session, and the purpose of work sessions is for the village manager, the chief, as well as Stuart Kahan, to really bring issues for our discussion, for presentation, for discussions, etc. And so I thought it was very appropriate to just let people know about that. And I wanted to also let folks know that we are going to have a town hall meeting. Even though we're a village, we will be having a town hall on May 20th, Thursday. We will put more information out there, but just putting it out for information to both staff and the public, that we are going to be discussing the new cannabis legislation. I had to look up how to spell cannabis. I always just called it pot, but you know, I'm gonna try to use the appropriate legal term. And I have been speaking to mayors in contiguous communities. This is one of those issues that isn't just within the invisible borders of each municipalities. This, I think, one community will have an effect on the other. It's been legislated at the state level for, I think, upwards of 7 years. Bills have passed, information is forthcoming, and we have to make decisions by the end of the year. So we would like to hear from the public. We will have next month, we will have a public session on this in the sense of a town hall where the board is going to hear from interested stakeholders and members of the public. So I look forward to that. That's it for my announcements. I'm pretty sure I forgot something or another, but we do send things out in the mayor's update with things that are coming up. So thank you all. And anybody else have anything? Not seeing anybody. I turn this over to Karen Diatori, Village Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. First up tonight, we have friends from Nelson Nygaard. We have Tom Brown and Maritel Font. I'm sorry, I mispronounced. And they will be talking about our parking study, existing conditions, our future demand and strategies. They've been working for some time. We've been working closely with them. So I will turn that over to them now so they can continue this conversation.
Great, thank you. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces on the screen. Hopefully you recall we presented in February and really tried to give an overview of our key findings from our existing conditions review. Tonight, we're going to focus on kind of, you know, the critical moment of every study, like what we're looking at in terms of potential recommendations. So this is an overview of what we're calling strategies, but these are strategies that we've worked through with the core group at the village. So this is an opportunity to present these and think about these as potential recommendations for the final outcomes of our study. So I broke the presentation into 2 groups: parking strategies and mobility strategies. And I'm going to try to go through these quickly to save time for questions and answers. So starting with parking supply, we're always if you recall, in February, we determined through utilization analysis during peak demand times that there wasn't a pressing need to significantly add to the downtown parking supply, i.e. building a new parking lot or looking to build a new structure. as a near-term need. There are longer-term strategies for that. But that said, we're always looking for ways to add parking in strategic ways. And one of those that we always look to is on-street parking. And here's an example, Academy Place, where this street is wide enough to accommodate parallel parking on the south side and adding angle head-in parking on the north side. And this would add significant parking spaces on this block that's right off of Spring Street to the benefit of those businesses. So this is in the early stages, but the geometry of the street suggests that that is a possibility.
I just asked a question, and I
Yep.
should have asked before you started, and welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Should we save questions to the end? Or what is your preference for a presentation? Wait till the end and we'll go through it?
I'm happy to take questions as we go along.
What do you prefer?
It's up to you. Well, if there's a pressing question, please jump in, but otherwise we will save time for questions toward
Great.
the end.
Thank you.
Okay.
And let's do that.
Okay. And the next category of opportunity is something that's been discussed quite a bit in the village, particularly for the downtown. And so taking it a step farther, we wanted to clarify that preparing for a long-term solution that involves adding off-street parking using the village's municipal lots needs some forethought, and really it more than forethought, we're encouraging the village to articulate what they want from the different lots. And so that starts by distinguishing which lots are really have the capacity to add significant parking. And so we think the real opportunity is if you can add significant parking here or here, that might free up the capacity to redevelop some of these lots where there is higher development interest or value. And that category includes lots 5, 6, 8, and 15, these here, where they are in a location where I could see attracting a development where they want to add land uses. This lot 8 is really the only location where the geometry, the size, the grade slope suggests an opportunity to add land uses as well as parking on the same site, but more likely you want to pair these in a sort of a master plan process where you're adding parking here so that you can put more development here, and the parking that's lost here is replaced over here. So we're working with the village to articulate how do you do that in an RFP process where you outline exactly what you're looking for, so that you're not just waiting for the right opportunity or the right development proposal to come your way. Some other opportunities, sort of longer term strategies, really investing in a strategic fee in lieu of parking option in your parking code. Particularly in the downtown, a lot of the development, especially infill, it's really not the best solution for them to provide as much parking as may be required because it's such a small parcel. They can use village lot parking. You want the development anyway. A fee in lieu option is a way to get a contribution from that developer to help maintain that parking that they are going to be using, rather than just providing a variance, which is what typically would happen if you do allow the development to go forward without the minimum parking requirement. Another opportunity is to incentivize in the development code for larger projects to include shared parking. And so this is almost more of a public-private partnership where there's an incentive for the developer to include enough parking and manage it in a way that there are shared benefits from that new parking, potentially with the village managing that parking. Now, another opportunity to expand capacity is not just adding new spaces, but changing how you regulate spaces or increasing access to spaces that already exist. So starting with this suggestion, which came from the village team actually, to change the 2-hour spaces along Central Avenue to 8-hour spaces. This would make these spaces viable for downtown employees. They're little used spaces today, so this is a way to recapture the value of those parking spaces that are not being used as visitor parking today, potentially by making them more viable to for other uses. Another opportunity that we've seen be very successful in other locations is using a pay-by-phone service, which you have in the village, working with private lot owners to identify an opportunity for them to open up their lots in evenings and weekends and use the pay-by-phone service to charge for parking. Usually when you talk about these kinds of shared parking arrangements, there's no real direct incentive for the lot owner to do that, and there is some increased risk that adds to their liability cost if there's a potential to make significant revenue during evening and weekend public parking. That cost obstacle can quickly be overcome. Of critical importance, one of the first things I think we heard from the team, maybe even before we got started, was the traffic congestion that was being created by drop-off traffic at Open Door. Great downtown community member, does generate a lot of traffic, and a lot of their visitors are being dropped off by Uber, Lyft, or taxis. And so managing that traffic in a way, what we're talking about is a pickup drop-off zone in a strategic location that moves that traffic off of Main Street, where it's currently affecting circulation and access to parking. And finally, expanding resident and employee parking options. So first, going back to that, opportunity for private lot owners to open up their underutilized parking capacity, whether they're off hours or during the daytime or evening, providing some employee parking options through virtual permits. More specifically, and again, this came from the village team, but we looked at the village lot off of Main Street at the Water Street intersection and looked at converting that, which is right now rail station parking. You have to have a rail station permit to park there, converting that to a municipal lot so that daytime and or evening permits can be used for that, to provide some parking relief for the residents in that area, which was developed before it was common for households to have multiple cars in that area. The next category of strategies we'll talk about is parking demand management. And this is really about, at least in these strategies that we're focusing on, is redistributing demand. So in almost any downtown, there are areas where most people want to park, and there are other areas where they're willing to park, but that's not where they go to first. And so where we're starting is with pricing. And again, the idea here is not to generate revenue, not to add the cost because you can, but it's a strategic way of pricing that high demand core differently so that you incentivize some drivers to go to those lower cost options first, where they wouldn't do that today because, all things being equal, they're all going to try to park on Spring or Main Street or in the best two lots in your village. So talking about creating a discount permit for the off-street lots to incentivize some downtown employees to choose those lots instead of the most popular ones, which tend to be 5, 6, and 8, and providing a universal permit that if you want to pay the full price for a monthly permit, then you can park in any lot that you want, and making sure that there's a significant differential to provide an incentive. And if you don't see the results that you want, which is more availability in those downtown core lots and more utilization in those peripheral lots, then you increase the differential to increase the incentive. Then similarly for the meters, providing a tier 1 zone where there's a premium rate for the meters and a standard rate in a zone that's a little bit further off of the 2 main streets. And then obviously the rest of the parking is free, making sure that that cost differential is there to create that incentive. Define this as this is how you're going to approach rate setting, that it's not about revenue, but it's about maintaining availability so that everyone's not crushing into the same downtown core parking options, creating frustration and leaving other parking options underutilized. Defining what you're looking at and how you determine when you will change parking rates and why, and that it's about performance and experience and not generating revenue. And then looking at the hardship parking permit, one of the things that we're excited about is the village has invested in what we call license plate recognition technology. They've already used this to convert the lot permits to virtual permits. So your license plate is your permit because the ID on your license plate is in a database. The enforcement officers use a reader. They read the plate. It connects with a license in the database, your permit is recognized and you don't get a ticket. There are ways to do that, for on-street permits, such as the hardship permit, in a way that you can provide a cost incentive for folks to only use a hardship permit on the days, weeks, or times of year where they need it. And this is meant to address some of the conditions that we heard early on in the process, where there are some blocks where there's so many hardship permits that if you get there after 8 p.m. on an evening, you can't find a space and you're limited to those street options. And this is a way to incentivize those who do have the option, but sometimes need to park on the street. Once they have a hardship permit, they're going to be more inclined to park on the street pretty consistently. So going to a virtual permit and charging by how frequently that permit is used may be a way to decongest some of those blocks to provide some relief for these residents. Another option that we want to explore, and we definitely during the open houses, we're hoping to hear from the businesses how they feel about this. But demand tends to pick up later in the morning in downtown. So you have availability at the curb. You don't really need to be charging often until 10 or 11 a.m. Conversely, more downtown economies are moving toward restaurants and evening-based uses. And so exploring extending meter hours into like 8 p.m., particularly in that tier 1 zone, those primary streets, to provide that availability in support of downtown businesses. Now, we want to make sure that the coffee shops, the dry cleaners, those that count on early morning curbside availability are comfortable with this, but this has worked very well in other communities, providing, and saying, hey, when we can make parking free and still have availability, we're going to do that. And we think we can do that in the morning. That's the idea behind this. And then going back to the village code in terms of parking requirements, and again, instead of providing a variance, we talked before in terms of supply about an in lieu fee. Another way to provide a variance but get something back, as we were talking to Trustee Quesada about this, and Ossining is in this funny space where you could have the same residential development in downtown, attract a bunch of 1 car or less households because they love the walkability, they love the shops and services, they love the train. Or, conversely, they could attract a lot of households where every member of the household has a car. It's urban, but it's suburban. It's close to New York. It's not close to New York. It depends on the perspective. And what this is looking for is a signal from the developer saying, hey, I'm providing bike parking, I'm providing transit passes, I'm doing these things to intentionally attract households with low vehicle ownership rates. And that's why I'm seeking this reduction in my parking requirement. Again, rather than just a variance where you're sort of trusting that they won't have as much parking need as they think. In terms of village parking operations and administration, again, expanding the benefits of the LPR investments that you've made, transitioning all permits to virtual, monitoring time limits more accurately. This is one of the biggest benefits of LPR technology. But also looking into longer term opportunities. One of the things we did in this study was count cars on street, off street, to see how well utilized your supply is, to see how adequate it is. There are software packages where you can convert plate reads from every reader as you're enforcing time limits. Those reads become data points that show you how many cars are parked on each block, in each lot. And that gives you an ongoing stream of information where you can monitor not only the sufficiency of your supply, but responses to different management practices, including pricing changes. One of the bigger opportunities that, is kind of falls into that low-hanging fruit category is improving wayfinding, and specifically for visitors. Residents know the village, employees will quickly learn the village, but it can be a daunting place to find the right parking option for you if you're a visitor, you're not familiar. There's some areas that have a grid, a lot of areas don't, and the slopes and the curves combine to really make it difficult if you're just winging it. So making sure that the wayfinding announces to visitors where the visitor parking is. When I pull up as a visitor and I see a lot that says municipal permit lot, even if there are time limit spaces for visitors in there, that's not what I'm thinking when I see that sign. So making sure you have signage that's welcoming to visitors and wayfinding signs that guide them to those locations efficiently. Finally, snow clearance was an issue that was brought up, I think last month during one of our calls. Leveraging some of the best practices from communities we've worked at with significant snow issues, identified an opportunity from November through May, simply limiting daytime parking to one side of the street to make sure that snowplows can get through or emergency vehicles can get through the street before the snowplows have gone through. And now I'll hand this over to Marichel, and she's going to talk about the mobility strategies.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tom, do you mind? So you're still in control of the presentation?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Perfect. So I'll go briefly through the mobility strategies. So this is a parking and mobility study. So we also looked at ways to improve mobility around and to access downtown. The first one that it's linked to parking, in fact, it's to coordinate parking and pedestrian wayfinding to promote the Parklands experience. And by that, we mean people using the wayfinding that Tom just showed. And then when people park at any location on any of these lots, there's some signage directing the visitors to the final destination. So we think that it's important that they know where they go and how long, and that to what information they're telling how long it will take them to walk to downtown or to the trail, for example. And also we think that it's important to have a consistently branded wayfinding. Second strategy is to improve walking facilities. So you already have a very walkable downtown, but there are some areas that could be improved, and we list here some of the potential improvements. So by that we're saying we mean enhanced pedestrian crossings, new crossings at key locations. So when we did the tour, we saw that there were some, I mean, in some streets, the crossings were really separate. So people basically cross, there's these eye lines and people cross in the middle of the streets with no crosswalk, marked crosswalk. Also fully accessible bus stops on both sides of the road. Universally accessible parking lots. So we also saw that there's some parking lots, the one behind Open Door, for example, that they're not accessible for people with disabilities. And also, if you would consider traffic calming features, which are street design features that what they do is that they slow vehicles as they drive, and that would improve safety for both pedestrians and bicyclists. Next slide. Oh, okay. Expand bike infrastructure and amenities. So there's the trail, and that's a great amenity. But we recommend to add more bike racks near key destinations, as well as bike repair stations, and to put safe, secure bike parking at major destinations. Following to that, we recommend to improve synergies with the Old Aqueduct Trail. It's a great asset, we believe, for walking and biking. It already has some maps and wayfinding, but we think it's important that to add in the maps the walking and biking destinations, as well as the parking lot locations. Same as the parking lots, we think that they should be ADA, the access to the trails should be ADA compliant whenever possible, so that it's used for all users with any age, with all abilities. And also we recommend to add bike valet services, not only close to the trail, but when there's or near when you do the farmers market on the weekend, for example. And last, in regards to walking and biking, to expand the walking and biking network beyond downtown. So not only improve that, but expand that. We did a walking in our report of the existing conditions. There was a walk shed and a bike shed, and you can mostly go everywhere within 15 minutes. So we really think that this recommendation should be expanded beyond what the study area. In our report of the recommendations, you will find this map where we were one step further, and we propose specific locations for these improvements. There's places where you will find, so here in the icons, you see that there's zebra crosswalks, median refugee islands, curb extensions, and bulb outs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and hawk beacons, leading pedestrians interval, bicycle parking, and AD accessible issues. This is just something that we put together that can serve you as a guide. As you can see, there are some of these improvements. Another strategy that we looked at was to expand connections to the waterfront and the Austining station by considering shared mobility options such as e-scooters or shuttles. One thing that we heard during the focus meetings was that people, even though they had to go to 2 locations that were close by or walkable or within walking distance, they felt that they didn't have the time for that, or the topography is also an issue. So we think that both e-scooters and shuttles would be a good option to provide, to give people different transportation options to move around downtown and also to access the station. Also, another way to incentivize the shared to share the use of the vehicle is promoting available ride matching platforms, so that people that maybe have the same work schedule or they go to the same places, so they have the same origin and destination, they share the rides. By that, you would be reducing vehicular traffic and parking demand as well. And last, we also think that investing in multimodal wayfinding is key. So we think that especially for visitors, instead of having them go around to look for destinations, it's important that once they park, as I said, that they know how long it will take them to go to the final destinations, but also that they see what other places they can walk or bike to. And thank you. And if you have any questions regarding to parking or mobility strategies, that's the moment.
You clearly are not familiar with the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining.
I just take the screen down, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am sure that there are. No, I don't think you should, because I think people are going to ask you to go. If you could put that back up.
Okay.
I think people might ask you to. Well, you know what? It's fine. When we need to go back to it, I think there are a lot of questions. So let's just do what we generally do, which is who wants to ask first. I know I have a bunch of questions.
I have just one question.
Fabulous.
Academy Place. I like the idea, but I'm presuming that's going to be made into a one-way street if you do that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that, but yes.
Okay, and that would be heading west to east?
Well, Chell this is more in Chell's area, but I think ideally I would think off the direction off of Spring Street, so that folks that are looking for parking on Spring Street and not finding it can just turn onto Academy and into a parking space versus circling back around. But
so then the south side of the street will be parking left side to the curb then?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It's easier if you look at the picture, I think, to be honest.
No, it's.
No, I know you know the roads. I'm just saying for the civilians in the public and in the crowd, it's easier to point to a picture. You know all the streets, so it makes it easier. You just took one question right off my my questions.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on that one, sure, because that's something that I've been talking about several years now. So I'm actually glad that it's now in front of the board, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward with this. So the idea on this one, yes, Bob, 100% correct, is make it a one-way going from Spring Street to State Street. And part of the discussion is something that I think Jaime, I saw Jaime in here. One of the things that I had asked is to look at the site plan of some of the properties in there, because some of the properties, they do have a big curb cut that we'd be able, maybe possible, to minimize that and make it a little bit smaller than what the curb cuts are right now, and probably hopefully provide additional parking spaces or parking areas on that side as well, across the street from the police station. So that's the concept on that one. You know,
I can answer that question because I was able to get access to those site plans where there were ones. So the one on the corner of Academy and State Street, it does have an approved site plan, and it's exactly as approved. The other property, which is the property that is between Broad and Academy, sort of covers that whole area. It appears to be too old. It doesn't have any site plan at all, in fact. If there's any records, it might be somewhere in like a DPW curb cut somewhere down the road. The only record that I did find for that one was a BAR approval for that property. So it's not clear to me whether or not they have any approved site.
So it's a potential that we could maybe do something about that, obviously. So the other thought about that area as well is, and I'm not sure if Tom, because that's something that we talked about, it is creating maybe at that corner somewhere, somehow, a loading area for businesses along Spring Street. So they can utilize that portion of Academy to do that and accomplish and kind of alleviate some of the traffic and the truck loading on Spring Street, because we do have a cluster of businesses in there. So that's something that I also asked for them to look into it. So I'm hoping that makes it as a part of the recommendations as well.
So I just have one more thing. Can you hear me?
Everybody, yeah.
Okay.
You're good. You're good.
There's only one concern that will pop up is what would be the clearance between a parked car and an angle parked car, and I'm asking that because of fire apparatus, because that's our front face of that building. So that's be something.
I think
to
they're
really
jotting down these questions because I don't think some of them are.
No, I'm not looking for immediate answers.
No, but you're saying, I think, who's running this project? Is it Maddi? Is it Jaime? Who's running this project?
I've been probably in the closest touch with Tom and Shell.
Great. So I think something that should go on a whiteboard that says major concern. And Manny has brought up the issue of loading dock, which was not actually in one of these except for open doors of human loading rather than, and those are problematic for the stores and stuff. So I think that's not included in here. So we might want to whiteboard that, Maddi, and just say, let's think about that. Okay.
Yeah,
what other questions or comments?
That's even a question you might want to ask the chief. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Now I'm done.
All good. All good. Okay. Any more questions or comments, please?
I have a question. I'm seeing more electric bikes around town. And I think especially for a hilly village like us, they may be more practical than non-electric bikes, because going up these hills can really be challenging. And it's always made me question how bike friendly we are. If you're going along the aqueduct north to south and it's flat, it's one thing, but if you're going east to west and the hills. But I was wondering if electric bikes require different types of bike stands or whether they take the same kind. So whether if a bike stand could take a regular bike, an electric or an electric bike, or and if that could be an option as opposed to e-scooters, which I personally question the safety of e-scooters. I just seen a lot of stuff about accidents on them, but I think electric bikes are a great thing for in general. I'm going to look into maybe.
So if you're talking about pedal assist bikes, they're pretty much the same. Their frame will usually be bigger because it holds batteries. And there's a small motor that is integrated into the back wheel usually, but they wouldn't require any sort of special bike storage. I mean, the same, you can put anywhere you can put a regular bike, you can fit a pedal assist bike. The scooters, I would defer to Nelson Nygaard here, but the scooters can be somewhat bigger.
They can be bigger, and they normally well, first, e-bikes would be a great option for auctioning. As Jaime said, they can be parked where regular bikes are parked. If they are a share system, if it's a dockless or, if they're docked, that's a separate conversation because you would need more public right of way to park them or to put the docks. For e-scooters, it's an option. That's true that in some places, if you don't regulate the speed, they have like driven to some accidents and conflicts with pedestrians. It's all about speed at the end, right? So right now, all the e-scooters companies are trying to ban so that the same vehicle, stops if the rider goes on the sidewalk, which is one of the conflicts that they have. I think there's room for improvement there. And the scooters also can be, they can be parked anywhere, or they can be, the parking areas can be geo-fenced, meaning that they can only leave the scooters in certain areas that you as the village should have to define and tell the providers, okay, we want scooters, but we don't want them all over the place like it has happened in some other areas. But anything electric or assisted would be great for the topography, right? Because it's a pretty compact village, Ossining, but the topography can be a barrier for some people.
Thank you. Dana, anything else? Okay, you're good. You're muted, so I couldn't hear you.
No, I'm fine for now. I mean, I am interested when you say potential parking structures. The two lots you identified are behind Main Street, right?
They're in front of they're near the post office, aren't? Isn't that where?
Parking structure off of Brand.
Well, the two that we identified as the highest potential for replacement parking capacity are behind Main Street. If those are the two that you meant.
And in order, I mean, these are very expensive structures to build, right? So
yes.
Ideally, how would you fund it? Something like that.
So that's the idea of the RFP, is to identify that this would be a public-private partnership. So that the developer partners with the village and provides development, and some of the parking, the municipality kicks in for some of the parking costs. But as part of that cost sharing, the village gets more of the parking that's built is public and less of it is private. So the developer saves some money on their cost and gets overflow parking while they hold on to a smaller piece of the supply as reserved, and the village gets a greater amount of public parking relative to what they put in. And one of the things that we're putting together is there are RFPs that other municipalities have put out there for this type of public-private partnership. But that's the idea, is that it saves the village and the developer money because they work out an arrangement to share the capacity.
Is lot 15 near St. Paul's Place, I know which lot that is that a municipal lot or is that a post office lot? It seems to be empty most of the time.
I think the post office lot is over here.
Right, and then there's another fenced in lot, and then
this is a municipal permit lot.
Oh, that's on Spring. Oh, that's the one by the rectory. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So you're saying that could be developed along with 5 and 6, and then the parking would go behind Main Street in a structure.
Right, that's the idea. Obviously, this is a bit farther away than if the development were here. The idea is these are parcels that we think would attract developers of a certain quality. Those are high value. This one's, the right on Spring Street is basically the difference maker. But obviously, these are the two that have been talked about the most.
Yeah,
so those are the more likely ones.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Omar, any
Sure.
comments or questions?
Absolutely. Want to start with gratitude. This was a great presentation, and I appreciate you coming here to give it to us. Number one, in terms of the points that I'd like to make, is when it comes to some of these, you call them a demand-based approach to rate setting. Is that no, sorry. The cost tiers, not demand-based. The cost is where you have parking demand management. Yeah, the cost tiers. So what I like about that is the creativity and the dynamism in trying to utilize discounts, and the flip side of that, upcharging for the kind of behavior that we would like to see to use unused spaces. One of the things that I would like for us to do, to whatever extent is possible, is collect data about ultimately who is using what kind of spaces. And the reason that I bring that up is because if this is, for example, like when government adds taxes to cigarettes, the idea is making it more expensive so that fewer people smoke cigarettes. Okay, then I'm behind that purpose. But one of the things that can be unintended here is if the difference between the downtown core and the other lots is too great, then what you might see is a bifurcation in who it is that's taking advantage of it. Namely, lower socioeconomic folks are then pushed to outer lots, and then higher socioeconomic folks can afford the downtown core lots, so that you end up with like a first class and coach kind of dynamic, which is not what we're going for. I don't think that's ultimately what's going to happen, but whenever you are trying to incentivize behavior and you're not paying attention to who that behavior benefits and doesn't, I would just like to track that in whatever way we can. And when it comes to wayfinding, I could not agree more that we could use much clearer signage when it comes to where parking lots are, so improve parking wayfinding. Yeah, that's the slide. I could not agree more in the need for this. The 2 points that I would make, one that is less obvious than the other. So one is making it ADA accessible, so in the kinds of colors that you use and whatever, making it so that folks that are colorblind or may have other kind of visual impairments are still able to take advantage of these wayfinding signs. And particularly because we're not getting rid of other signs that are there, we're adding more stuff. And so making it clear, but in a way that's accessible, is going to be important. And then secondly, we also have a large Spanish speaking population. And so to whatever extent we can make it so that all parking signs and traffic signs, all that stuff tends to be in English, which in order for you to drive in New York State, the test is in English. The assumption is you speak English at least enough to drive, to be able to understand the signs. Nevertheless, if someone is visiting our village, to me, it is extra welcoming if we say like, hey, we'd love for you to park here. Also, parking, like where you can find it is available in Spanish. And I think there are ways to do that in a way that's not really obtrusive or doesn't look bad. But to me, it would be extra welcoming, particularly to our community, if you were to do that as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Those are great. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a few. First of all, terrific work. I appreciate it. This is long overdue, so thank you to everybody for finally bringing this to the front burner. So I have some larger, I want to talk more about mobility, then I'll talk about parking. So there were a few things, I really like this whole thing. This is all great. A couple of things missing for me that might just be considered. The naming of lots. These numbers don't make any sense to me. Renaming them in a way that humans can understand. It's a little bit of what Omar was also saying, which is communications is important. Look, I think that 80% of people that come into this village know the village. You know, if you don't know it right away, eventually you know where you have to go. You go there regularly and you sort of figure it out. And if you work there, for sure. But still, we're not planning for this year or next year. We're planning for the next 10 or 20 years. And that's what I'd like to keep in mind. So whatever technology is available that you could put on a sign from a form of communication, whether it's language, I don't know how long QR codes are going to last, but certainly a way for somebody to sort of take a picture and find where the next lot is, and naming or numbering them in a sequential way or in some way that human beings, like, I don't know why 15 is next to 3. Like, I don't know what all of that is about. I'm sure it meant something at some point. So that is maybe in your study. You don't have to answer it. These are just comments that I didn't see it. So I would appreciate a look. I love the idea that you looked at one-way street opportunities. We used to have a bunch of one-ways that would then turn into two-ways. So some people that will see this are going to go crazy because they spent 3 years making, what was it, Spring Street two-way? I mean, it was one way for a long time. So, you know, but that's okay with me. You know, things change, things get updated, all good. I love the idea of everything that you've done, mobility. I do expect the staff to be aware of certain things, both in mobility and in parking, because some of the answers aren't about concrete and lines. Some of them are about going to open doors and asking why they don't have an entrance from the back where there's a parking lot. So people in the Ubers and everybody drops them there because they could more cheaply redesign their entrance than the village would spend on creating a loading area, because all they have to do is move the front and the back of their building to a different location. So I would encourage staff, I don't think it's for you necessarily to have a human conversation with some folks about loading docks. So loading docks are missing for me in this conversation. In this study, I had expected something that talks about where trucks can unload or not. And it's not about punitive, you know, they shouldn't be dropping food off for the Chinese restaurant on Main Street on a Saturday morning and blocking the traffic as they did this past Saturday. Having said that, there should be maybe a loading area that may lose us 2 spots, etc. So there are human ways to solve issues, not just, and I would just say, let's look at those as well. My big question for both studies, actually, we'll talk about parking in a minute, the mobility, which I think is actually the more important aspect here, because you gave us a whole bunch of strategies. What I would love to see going forward, I'm happy with this. I would be happier if you gave me some sort of idea of strategies and their relationship to one another and their relationship to, without an RFP about budgets, if that's not in your basket of deeds. But if you could only do one thing, which would it be? I am trying to understand, and I don't know if you could speak to it, the relationship, like, do we first go with, if we only had $100, do we do all the ADA fix-ups? Do we do all of the signage? Is signage really 2 things? If you do one thing, I mean, I get a sense of, here's a list of all the great things you can do. I'm glad the electric bike came up. I would have thought there might be like parking areas for bicycles, motorcycles, etc., so that you're saving on parking. So these are just some comments. This is a work session. That's what we're supposed to do. But I would suggest that some of your ideas really become a little bit more top line to, if I could do one thing, if all Austin could do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It may be that number 10 has to be done with number 1. So you might move that around. That, from a consulting point of view, would be very helpful to me, because if we did it as 5 board members, this will be a conversation that goes on for 2 years. If you do it with some expertise and what you understand more objectively, I think that might be really like super helpful to us, and I appreciate it. And I do want to say that everything that we're talking about has to last for 10 to 15 years. So lines and parking are really important. I would have liked to see in this that the technology in cars are shifting. So self-parking cars are now in luxury cars, right? So you've got the Teslas, the BMWs, the Audis, the Porsches, the Volvos have self-parking. Actually, my Nissan Leaf, I just didn't know it has it too. And that's not a luxury car. I'm sure that's the technology going forward. So when we pay for consulting, it would make me happier that we didn't talk about best practices today, but that we think about mobility and what's coming down the road, so that we're set up a little bit. So if drawing lines so that self-parking cars, and yes, I know people watching go, oh, and Austin won't have it. Okay, Ford is already producing those. in the lower models. It's not that far off. Let's just make sure that you guys include what's coming up technology, both in the bikes, which has to be redone. We all know they've tried them in cities, and they're going to be out in the next year with something better and better and better every year. We're planning on that. Let's also think about cars. So those are just some of the things. In addition to the fact, I think you did a wonderful presentation of here are all the things that you can think about. I'd like to have prioritization, because I don't care what RFP we're doing. We're not going to be able to afford the kitchen sink here. We're going to have to understand what works well with what. The parking piece was also terrific. So much appreciated. So long overdue. I can't even begin to tell you. I lost a $5 bet. I already got a text from somebody who lives in this village that I owe him $5 because I said in my tenure this will never get done. And apparently I was wrong. It's getting done. So you lost me $5 today. I will not hold that against you. But I will say that much of your conversation is about development. So you must think that some of the parking solutions that we're looking for has to do with increased development in the middle of the village in order to be talking about how you can increase parking, because in the beginning of your presentation, you have stated clearly today and last time we met that upon looking at parking, Ossining does not actually have the kind of parking problem that was originally thought about. And I'm not saying it exactly the way you did. It's that people may not want to walk another 5 minutes. And there may be times where it's congested. Therefore, your mobility study made a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. But that actually there is parking and in the village. There is an issue with staff, Open Door being one of them, although they did buy 2 Church Street and there's lots of parking there, and they don't have to do a private public. They can build their own multiple parking lot for themselves without having the taxpayers having to do that. So there are what I call human solutions, not necessarily taxpayer solutions too, right? But the developers became a conversation about midpoint in your parking. I sort of lost you there because I didn't realize that one of the premises you're working with is how do I create more parking for development? So somewhere I lost you. Is that part of the study, is how to create more parking for more development in the middle of the village?
No, and in fact,
okay.
what we are responding to is the fact that redeveloping these lots have been, my understanding, a long-term objective, or at least a long-term idea to explore as a way to sort of fill in your main street frontage, right? Like you have this historic frontage along here.
Got it.
It's missing on the other side of Main Street. The challenge has always been trying to squeeze redevelopment and replacement parking on these sites, and they're just not big enough to do that effectively. And so, and we make this clearer in the report, and I apologize if I didn't make this clearer tonight. The idea of potentially adding replacement parking here is so that you can develop more here. If this isn't happening, there's no real reason to do this.
Well, then I appreciate that. I appreciate the clarification.
That's why we say clarified in the RFP that you're looking for both.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you're not really deciding whether it should be commercial or if it should be residential or mixed. You're just saying if you want A, right, B has to happen. And B is over here and A is over there. So right. I lost you a little bit in the middle. My apologies. And I appreciate the clarifications. Thank you. Those were, the prioritization was the biggest thing for me in both studies and understanding.
And just to be clear, not to interrupt, but like
no, please.
that will be part of the final report. So once these become recommendations, what we add to the last piece of the final report is the implementation guide, which will be exactly that, phasing. What will be the easiest, most impactful things to do? What are longer term priorities and what may need further study?
And the only thing I would ask of you, not the only because I've already asked 5 things, but, and maybe it's a legal issue that occurred to me as Omar Lopez was speaking. So I always have issues like he does. I think he's right. I think that is what's going to happen. Not intentional, in fact, exactly the opposite of what we want happening. But the use of data, so the technology you speak of actually is with our police department, right? It's in that part of our municipality. So we're going to have to coordinate those efforts. But what's really interesting to me is using data. So no more of like, oh, there's no parking. Oh, there's no
Right.
this. Oh, right. We have hundreds of these conversations. It's such a waste of time because, you know, if you had data, you could say, well, you know, actually there's 1 hour where there's no parking, but the other 23, not so much a problem, right? So you'd have that. It would be nice to know if people are like over 70, whether they're handicapped or not may not matter to us, or future boards. They may say, if you're over this age, handicapped, not, it doesn't matter. You can park anywhere for this price, anywhere, anytime, not just if you're handicapped. Like you could start making decisions based on data is what I'm hearing in this presentation. And I'm not suggesting we do exactly that. What I'm hearing is that I just don't know if legally you could ask people's age and incomes and just sort of make assumptions based on, you know, what street they're on and all that. But the data should be available is what you're saying to us in this study.
So I think one of the things you can definitely do, communities that have moved to using license plates as the permit, but also on street, a pay by plate, which is what when you pay by phone, you're paying based on your license plate. One of the things that communities have done, and this hasn't really come up here, but they have done is you can charge a different rate for village residents, or you could charge a different rate for senior citizens or low-income families, because you do have the plates and they can pre-register as you know, a special rate permit if they're willing to. Then they're opting into it, so the privacy issue is avoided, right? They're opting into it to get the discount. Everyone else is not registered. Those are possibilities. We haven't explored those, but the LPR technology that you have and are starting to use well does open up a lot of possibilities.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to see we're ahead of the curve. So those were a lot of questions from me, and I, you know, I'm excited. I'm
Good.
excited.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Mayor, can I go? I didn't want to go last, but I have a few questions also and some clarifications as well, if that's okay.
My apologies, Manny, because I actually thought when you asked the other questions.
No, I had more questions.
Apologies.
No, I definitely, I want to emphasize on something that you mentioned is in regards to the pick up and drop off zone on Main Street in regards to open door. I'm not in favor of that. I think we should look at different strategies, because we are doing this for, you know, this parking study to me is a downtown, not in a specific business. We should not be looking at a specific business itself. So I want to make that clear. That part of the conversations that we had, I make my point that I was not in favor of having something like this. Just as a point of clarification on that one, I do want to also make a clarification where we're talking about the change of on the code about parking waivers or parking exemptions. That's something that the board has discussed on prior occasions. Thank you. And not that one. No, go back one more. In regards to development itself, sure, there has been times that we've seen developers come in and say they don't have enough parking spaces within the same lot itself. So we have looked at other municipalities where there's a fee attached to that portion of the code, where, you know, depending on which municipality you go to, you know, it varies on what fee that is charged. So again, I want to make sure that that's something that we as a board have talked about previously, and I mentioned that to Tom in one of the conversations that we had, that I think if this is going to be part of it, that should be attached to that. So there's something again to look into it as well. The other one that I was interested to see, and I guess a little bit more description on, it was, just give me a minute, improvement of, no, that wasn't the one. It was about the walkability, short, new crossing keys, new traffic calming features. Can you can you develop a little bit more into that one, onto the mobility itself? What's the traffic calm features that we can look into? Because we have talked about prior years too, and I know I didn't say this in our internal meetings, but humps and other streets. But what do you guys have in mind in regards to the traffic calming portion of this?
So there's a lot of different traffic calming measures, and they work well in different streets. If the one that you just mentioned, if it's a street that it has a high track volumes, we don't recommend that, for example, right? What we can do, so we have some toolkits, which basically there's a list, and we can add that if that's something you want to see, a list of the traffic calming and in what type of streets they could work or in which locations.
To me, that'd be very helpful. And I don't know, at least to me, I can only speak for myself. You know, obviously the board, as a board, we can make a different decision. But you know, I would like to see some samples that you're referring to, and based on that, I think it'd be something useful for us to have in hand, obviously. And the humps weren't specific to this area; they were specific to the other areas on our village in regards to trying to slow the traffic. Obviously, I should say the speed of some vehicles.
The speed, exactly.
So yeah, I'd be curious to see what kind of tools could we use here in the village to do something like that. But those are just a few questions that I have. I don't have anything else. I think everybody else kind of covered everything that I had in mind. I love the sign idea as well. And kind of to piggyback on what the mayor mentioned about it, and I did mention this to the board, to the internal staff, is that I agree, Mayor, we should name this parking lots. And one of the ideas that was a couple of years back when I brought this over, it was like maybe have some sort of, I don't want to say competition, but have the community actually have some sort of input on what the parking lots should be named after. And, you know, just an idea. I don't have any additional questions, Mayor. Thank you.
And, my apologies that strategy is in our report. It's my fault it didn't make it into this presentation. The renaming of the lots. And Mayor, you're on mute. Sorry.
Buttons, which is why I forget. It's not your fault. We asked for 10-minute meetings because we like to talk, so everything goes longer. So you did exactly what you should have. I just appreciate you saying that it's in there, so we'll see it. So did exactly the right thing, exactly the right amount. We appreciate the work. I think we can move on, but I would like, so thank you, Tom, thank you. And the rest of your group, thank you all. And for both the mobility and the parking, put into one. Karen, I would just ask that, I don't know if Bob Fritsche's group is here, but if they're on, and this is now getting a little bit late.
Yes, they are here. So I was hoping, I was going to jump in and say, could we maybe bump them up because their advisors are here, but you know.
Yep, that's why I just, is that okay?
It shouldn't take long. It's just, you know, if they wait to the end, it's going to be, I'll have only one person left, and that wasn't.
Sure.
No, we got it. That's why I'm asking Karen, because she does, she actually manages the agenda at the work session. So can we move this group up so that,
sure
thank
thing.
you.
So
Sure
Bob,
thing.
Bob, may I ask, is there anyone in the attendee list that needs to be brought over?
No, they're all actually at the firehouse together, the advisors, so they're only on one screen.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
Great. All right.
All right, thank you, everybody. So with that, we're gonna this over to Trustee Fritsche and our members of the fire department, and we're going to talk about our venturing crew. So Bob will have more information on that.
Okay, so basically, I don't want to take a lot of time. This was a discussion that was brought up between me, myself, and Stuart, and the possibility of bringing the venturing crew over to be part of the fire department and not be controlled by the Boy Scouts of America, which would give us as a department somewhat more control of how things operate. And, you know, I had given Stuart 2 sets of bylaws, the actual bylaws that they work with now, and a set from Buchanan's venturing crew or explorer post. So we have the advisors, they're all together, and I believe Ben is going to be doing the speaking for them. So with that, Stuart, do you have anything that you would like to preface this with before Ben speaks?
No, Trustee Fritsche, I think it'd be good to hear from Mr. Plachta at this time. I think that would be the best.
Ben, can you move the screen just a little bit so we can, first of all, you're on mute. I just want to see if possible some of the other folks sitting next to you.
So if I move it any further, it's going to fall off the table.
Okay.
So actually, that's how I'll start. So with me tonight, I have one of the founders of the venturing crew here with me is Bruce Goebel. He's also a deputy chief of the Austin Fire Department. The venturing crew was founded in 1999 by Bruce. And here I have Yvette Sanchez, who's actually the wife of a current chief in the Austin Fire Department as well. So just quick background, as I previously stated, the venturing crew was founded in 1999. We don't necessarily have like a mission statement, but the idea of the venturing crew when it was formed was to make sure that we guide the younger kids into becoming volunteer firefighters. I don't know, I mean, Bob knows already the retention problem for a volunteer fire department is pretty big in New York, all over the country actually. The volunteer service is slowly disappearing, and Ossining relies on the volunteer fire department. So we have the venturing crew. Since 1999, we've actually retained 25 to 30 members that have gone through the venturing crew and are now actually drivers and officers in the fire department. The venturing crew, we do trainings on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of every month. We participated, our venturing crew members specifically participated in Recruit New York. I missed something. Rika, you're laughing, and I'm not sure at what.
No, I love the way you're bringing the context. I think it's great. Usually we get the PowerPoints. They're very. I mean, I'm loving that you're excited.
We are no
context. That's why.
Ben, I just want to mention that they do. If it warrants it, they do go to competitions with other crews. So that's just another thing that they do, and it's a big networking thing. It's huge.
Okay.
Right. So right. So we are very excited. Currently, we have 24 current members. They're all in Ossining. It's one of the, I don't know if I saw that Bob posted the bylaws, so you guys can look over those. One of the requirements are that they are a resident in Ossining and go through Ossining High School. So we do have currently 24 kids in the group. As Bob had mentioned, we are insured currently through the Boy Scouts of America. I mean, that's pretty much all I have. I don't know how much or how little you guys were looking for. If you have any,
no, I think this is really good, Ben. I just want a point of clarification, not even a question. I just want the public hears this. This is being recorded. We're not taking this away from the Boy Scouts in any way.
Absolutely not.
Right.
So I don't know if Bruce. So when this was founded in 1999, I was like 10. So I wasn't there. The Boy Scouts, we're not taking anything away from the Boy Scouts. We want to take the venturing crew and make it part of Ossining more than it already is, right? We are the Boy Scouts venturing Explorer Post actually now, Explorer Post 467. 467 is actually our call sign on 4626, which Bob knows about. So we are Ossining oriented. We do community things, right? Most recently, we're actually setting up a propane drop off for anybody has empty propane bottles, and the venturing crew is going to sponsor that. What we want to bring the venturing crew into the Ossining Fire Department. There are benefits from it that we can see down the line. Making the kids part of the Ossining Fire Department would give, instead of going home and saying, Mom, Dad, I'm part of the Boy Scouts, it's Mom, Dad, I'm part of the Ossining Fire Department. And that's, I mean, you take somebody, our age limit's 14 up until you join the department or you age out at 21. Most kids join the department as soon as they can. So that's what we're looking for, that community-oriented, I mean, I'm sure you deal with the Ossining Fire Department enough. We are very community-oriented.
No, thank you. I don't know, trustees, questions, comments? We've discussed this actually before. I believe even our attorney, Stuart Kahan, has mentioned that his son actually went through the program himself and how wonderful it is.
Yep.
Any?
I can start.
Please.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate you coming to present, as well as the other two folks that you have with you there. So I think this is great. Ossining, no question, relies on its volunteers, and to have this feeder program of sorts, I think is immensely intelligent. And so the questions that I have are really logistical in nature and not to do with the content of the venturing crew. One of my places of confusion is what I thought going into this, the idea was right now the venturing crew is under Boy Scouts, right? And so we're looking for it to no longer be under Boy Scouts, but be under the Village of Ossining.
Correct.
So when the mayor says we're not taking anything away from the Boy Scouts, maybe it's just like the phrasing, but like at the end of the day, the Boy Scouts will not have this. We will have this. Whether somebody's giving something, we're taking, you know, it doesn't really matter, but like.
Yeah, I think it's just the phrasing. I mean, okay. I guess, yeah, the Boy Scouts are losing the greatest venturing crew they've ever had. But
there you go.
Ossining gains the venturing crew.
Okay, that part is now clear. I appreciate that.
Secondly, my phrasing was more to do that we're not competing with them, that something bad happened. I don't want the public to think that, because I understand from Trustee Fritsche that this is a mutually the right thing to do, that we're not, that there's no bad blood, but rather actually that this is a good thing.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay. One of the questions that I had before when we talked about this was about liability, and you mentioned that right now the insurance is through the Boy Scouts. Can you talk about what liability and all that would look like in this new world?
So I actually cannot currently. I don't know if Bob has additional information that he could provide, but right now we're putting this on the table of something that we're very interested in doing, something that we want to do. If you asked me what the price per kid would be, I couldn't answer that for you right now. So I don't know if Bob has anything to add into it, but as of right now, we're presenting this. If this is something that the village wants to undertake, we will obviously make sure that everything money-wise, whatever is state budget, is taken care of. But right now, I couldn't tell you what the price per kid would be, or an
So I believe, Stuart, we've had this conversation, and I believe Stuart would be the best to touch on this. But as far as operating budget, they have their own little budget that they work off of, and basically that budget just gets them dinner after training, and you know, really, or if they have the money, they buy shirts like that nice shirt that Ben has on right now. But you know, that's basically what their budget does. It's not really a constraint in any way on the village as far as another budget line or anything like that. So I believe Stuart could help us with the insurance part of it.
So I just want to clarify my question. By insurance and all that, I don't mean like operating budget, but I mean like liability. If a kid falls and breaks his leg or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
I believe Stuart can help us with that.
Trustee Lopez, let me, I did have a chance to send the bylaws and the information to our insurance broker. And as someone who has done insurance defense for I hate to say 40 years now. We do have coverage. Our current policy does, for example, provide coverage for sexual abuse and molestation claims. And one hates to acknowledge it, but unfortunately, in the times that we live in, you have to make sure that that coverage is there. There are always issues of liability under any circumstance. Someone could be injured. Someone could be injured while being trained. Someone could be injured while going to or from, while at a scene, while getting to. All that happens. Would that potentially increase the village's risk from an actuarial perspective next year when we re-up our policy? I don't know. I can't answer. I don't think the amount would be that great because, as Ben has indicated, the number of members is fairly slight. I suspect that in terms of training for dealing with youths, it will be important that whatever training they may have gotten through BSA is similarly, that they can show that they've had similar training to whoever our insurance carrier is, so that, there's that comfort knowing that, many of these organizations now provide that training for their explorer groups, their venturing groups, or whatever. So that's the important thing. But other than that, it would be, the analogy is that if we have people who are at our rec department who are doing an activity and potentially get injured, there's and there could be coverage for that as well. What I don't know, and I can just tell you this because I simply don't know, is whether the volunteer fire benefits law, which is essentially workers' comp for firefighters, would apply to a circumstance if someone from the venturing crew was out, at a particular scene, putting down a hose or something like that, which I think is in the bylaws. I don't know the answer to that question. I think, again, from an actuarial standpoint, that would be a minuscule thing, but it would be something to just check out. I just, again, I don't have the answer. I can tell you, though, is there coverage for what would be done? The answer for that is yes. But would it have an impact on future coverage years? I just don't have the answer for that, but I can tell you that there is coverage for it. That was the first thing that I thought of, but that's basically there. Bob or Ben, maybe just ask this one question. I know that in the membership, you have you're a resident of or attend school in the town or village of Ossining. Does that mean a Briarcliff Manor resident could be a member of the venturing crew?
Yeah, so if they attend the Ossining High School, Ossining schools, then yes. Briarcliff actually has their own explore post as well.
Okay, so they need, not only do they need to be a resident of, the key thing then sounds like they have to live with the Ossining School District.
Correct. Yes.
Well, okay,
Yes.
Which is what I saw Buchanan had with regard to theirs. Okay,
right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. My last question is around something that you refer to. So one of the big issues that the Boy Scouts of America has had is around sexual abuse. And so with this falling on the village, one of my questions is, how is sexual abuse and something that I'm thinking about it from both perspectives, both from what is already in place and what might we do on the adult side, on the prevention side, whether that's like background checks or trainings or whatever, and then on the child side as well, or like here's where you go if you see something or something happens to you.
So currently, right now, and going forward, all of the advisors are part of the Ossining Fire Department. So those, I'm not 100% sure if there's, I know the Ossining Fire Department does some sort of background check, which is already done just being members of the Ossining Fire Department, right? Our stuff gets sent up to Albany and it gets reviewed over. So that I can confirm is already being done just to be a member of, right? If somebody gets hurt, you see a firefighter, you run to them. That stuff is already being done. When it comes to what the Boy Scout is doing in addition, to what we already do in the Austin Fire Department. They do have a youth protection, which is what I'm looking at right now, which you have to do yearly. I can send you the course. You can actually take the course if you would like. It's free. You just go onto the BSA website and you can take the course. And it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And you go through and there's emotional abuse, physical abuse, and we take it every year. And that's by the Boy Scouts, what we have to do. And the Boy Scouts also do specific background checks. Now, I couldn't tell you exactly what they check for. I just know that I fill out the form and give it to the Boy Scouts. What they actually check for, I don't know. What we do as advisors ourselves, right? I think Mr. Kahan said it the best. He said, in this day and age, you just never know anymore. So right, you always, we make sure we do have female advisors. A large portion of our crew is actually female, which is great. So we do always, as you can see, one of our female advisors is here. Right, you never travel alone with anybody, all that standard stuff. So I mean, I feel like most of it's being taken care of. The only one piece that the Boy Scouts is doing in addition is that youth protection course that we have to take on a yearly basis.
Got it. Okay. So I think one of the things that would be helpful for me to know is if there's already something that the rec department does or any other village entity that works with youth that would be easy for you all to partner with so that you have a sense of those things, then I think that would be great.
Sure. I mean, you guys might actually know better than I would if the rec has a youth protection program that their employees go through.
It'll be, I think the point is that you were just being asked that we coordinate. I'm sure somebody on staff will help with that as well. Are there any other comments? Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Trustee Lopez. Were those your questions? Great. Comments, questions, looking around?
Question. It's a very basic question. I'm new to this issue, but what is the reason for transitioning this program from Boy Scouts to the village?
So we want to bring in the venturing crew into the Austin Fire Department. Right now, we're through the BSA and have been for quite some time. We're looking for that community-oriented, right? Instead of I think I mentioned it earlier already. You want the kid to go home. You want it from Austin, right? We're all very proud of being from Austin. So one of those things is also being able to say, hey, I'm part of the Austin Fire Department venturing crew, instead of saying I'm part of some, just the BSA.
Okay, so it's a volunteer. It has nothing to do with the Boy Scouts and what's going on with them. And
no, it has. So I feel like this has come up almost 3 or 4 times now. There is absolutely no issue with the Boy Scouts. We have not experienced any issues with the Boy Scouts currently. Everyone obviously sees the news and what's going on with them. This has absolutely nothing to do with that. They've treated us well. There's no other way to say it. There's no issue with the Boy Scouts, none whatsoever.
Dana, I think just to give you a little history, when the crew was formed, the main person that formed it was a guy by the name of Joe Lorenz, and he was very heavily involved with the Boy Scouts. So this is where that opened that door, I guess, back then to get this going and off the ground. And it's just been status quo. And now everybody throughout Westchester, pretty much 90% of any Explore posts are part of their fire departments. So we're just trying to get on the ship and be the same, Again, there's no issues with the BSA. It's just that's how we started with the BSA because of the original guy who formed this crew.
No, I think it sounds like a fine idea. Would it affect the fire department budget? Would it cost the village?
No. They, like I said, they have a small little budget that I believe is from the commissioners, correct, Bruce? And it's very, very minuscule. There'd be no impact on the village. As far as
insurance coverage.
Yeah, except for if there's a little slight coverage that we don't know what that is, but you know, overall in the grand scheme of things, you know, like I've said when we met, this is a huge feeder program for us. And it's, and this day and time, we're a very fortunate department as far as retention, but that could change. You know, we've been very lucky. I've been a member since a couple of years ago, and so, and I've seen
Since you've been a couple of years old, you meant.
Yeah. Thanks, Rika. But you know, this is a huge step for them. All right, it's a huge step for the department, and you know, I appreciate all the support. We appreciate what the advisors do. I try to attend as many trainings as possible. My stepson is actually a part of the crew right now, and it's just, it's a great thing. It really is.
Thank you, Bob. Dana, those, I think is that what you had?
Yeah.
Okay, and
I was
Manny.
going to add on to what Bob said, you know, regarding retention. I mentioned earlier, the volunteer service is being impacted in all of the entire country, especially in New York. You're seeing it all over. If you look at neighboring departments, just locally in Westchester, you'll see a decrease in their numbers. In the last 4 years, last year alone, we took 4 members from the venturing crew and they became members of the department. So that's, you know, it works. It does work, and it's free fire prevention.
Manny, anything? Not everybody has to say something, but I just want to go around the gallery.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. No, actually, the questions that I had, they were already asked.
Great.
And no, thanks, Bob, for bringing this up to our attention. Been great presentation. I was, you know, thank you. I'm in favor of this. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I'm just looking at the clock. I am in support of this. I'm hearing a lot of support. I didn't hear anybody say a no. This will be the time to say no if you so wish, or ask more questions. I'm hearing a lot of positive comment. I think it's also a mentoring program, and I say yes to every mentoring program. So I think it's great. Anybody want to tell me what the next steps are beyond the trustees? It's not a vote, so I don't know what the next steps are. If somebody could enlighten us, that would be fabulous.
I would think, Ben, we're looking at, you want to formally make the venturing crew, you know, essentially part of the village rather than not part of BSA. Do you need to formally withdraw from BSA?
No, so we actually renew a charter yearly. Okay. So our charter is currently approved for this year. So 2021 is completely already paid for. So there's no withdrawal. We just don't renew our charter.
Mayor, I apologize. What is it? Do the youth members pay dues?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Do they pay dues?
No, the department, that's part of the budget
we
have
okay.
For the venturing crew are their dues.
I was comparing it to Buchanan because I saw that in their bylaws they actually list, you know, some dues.
Yeah, no, we take care of everything for our kids.
Okay, fair enough.
Great. So it doesn't actually sound like we have to do. There's no legislation.
None.
It might just be a resolution of support. I mean,
well, that's where I was going with that. I think we have to put something somewhere. Future boards might be discussed in 4 years, 5 years, 8 years. People are going to go back and say, Ben will be a few years older, Bob will be a couple of years older, and, you know, institutional history, so that future members of both the fire department and the boards have a sense of, you know, this is what we did, this is why.
And I think, Mayor, one thing just for the board and I guess staff as well, with the folks also from OFD to think about is where this will fit in within the village. In other words, is it through OFD? Is it through REC? Is it potentially through the Youth Bureau, which we will be starting soon. But in any event, a resolution of support is not a problem. We can certainly put that together, and then they can, you know, go forward. Because I think from what I saw from the bylaws, you can max out at 40 members if you could actually, you know, get yourself up to there. So, so we can certainly put something together, Mayor. That's not a problem.
Okay. Thank you, Ben and company, and Bob for bringing it to our attention. Thank you, folks. We'll put something in writing at some point. Bob, thank you for bringing this to the forefront. Thanks everybody for doing it. And I think that we're going to be able to say good night to you folks, unless you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, which you are welcome to do.
I thank you guys very much for having us on tonight.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Village Manager, we're back to you.
Okay, so thank you. That's great news about the venturing crew. Next up is comprehensive plan. We're back to our comprehensive plan, and our friends from BFJ are back tonight. As you know, we've closed the public comment period, and they will be back discussing the public comments and how we might address them. So with that, I would like to turn this over to our friends at BFJ and to Jaime.
Good. Well, thank you all. Can you hear me? It's Frank Fish.
You're doing great, Frank. Hello, everybody. Hello, gang, crew.
Simon's here with us, and Sylvia, and Jaime's here. So I think I'm just going to give a brief introduction, because I hope all of you got from us sort of a letter or a memo that summarizes the comments that we've received courtesy of Jaime and the manager's office. And we've suggested some potential responses to those comments. We thought maybe we could go through those tonight with you, and then you will have, your comments tonight also. I did want to just mention, we did a little bit of a agenda for ourselves, just to mention that the generic environmental impact statement we shared Tuesday with Jaime and Stuart and the manager's office, and we'll send that out to you so that you have it at the end of this week. And we're hoping that on that FEIS that a resolution can be done for your May 5th meeting next week, so that you could, again, it's like the DEIS, the idea would be to accept it just for public circulation so the public can see it. Just so you know, there won't be any surprises there. We had a 40-day comment period on it, but there were no comments specific to the DGIS. So there's really, the FEIS says that. And then after that, that can conclude seeker once you do what's called findings, which would come after that. But the major thing is to be able next week to circulate it to the other agencies, obviously the county and your planning board, and then we can send it to the state, and then we have to wait for comments from them on any comments might come on the FEIS. So I just wanted to mention that that'll be a next document coming to you. And maybe just mention these upcoming dates. Of course, tonight we're here just to discuss with you in your workshop session, just the discussion of plan and zoning changes. And you can see we'll send out by Friday what I just mentioned, the FEIS. And then we hope that, after tonight and further discussion, that in May we can make revisions to the plan and the zoning based on your direction. And then the May 5th legislative session, the only thing we're expecting there is if you could just accept the FEIS for distribution to the public. And then the May 19th legislative session, that might be one where you could accept the seeker findings, which will basically say that there were no comments on the DGIS. We found no significant adverse impacts, and the findings would be positive and allow you then to act, possibly on June 2nd, your legislative session there on adopting the plan and the zoning. You have to complete the State Environmental Quality Review Act, before you can act on the plan and the zoning itself. So that's, as you can see, we're sort of at a point where public hearing and comments have been closed. So this is now in your hands in terms of evaluating the comments made. I might, and I'll defer to Stuart on this, but I might just mention in respect to the comments made, it's usually the norm after a hearing's closed to make changes that are based on the comments made or that are in the record in some way, so that if a totally new concept were raised at this point, you know, if it's significant and it's different than the plan, it could require another public hearing. So usually what happens is we stick to the comments made and the record made and your responses, and then that allows you to revise the plan as you wish. You would make those revisions and then be able to submit a revised plan to you for your, you know, for your eventual adoption. So that's the overall sort of schedule. We're sort of what used to be a long schedule now is a fairly short schedule because we're sort of at the conclusion point of the plan. So with that, I might, if you'd like, Simon could go through, or we could just turn it to you, Mayor. Simon could go through our memo to you all, just to the one that summarized the comments, and then that might structure your comments in return, if you wish.
Oh, Rika, you're muted. I don't know if I see your lips moving, but I don't hear anything.
Sorry about that. That sounds like a reasonable plan of action.
Great, terrific. I would just say one thing that we didn't have when we sent this to you were comments from the planning board, but you now have them. So the big two comments for us, just as an introduction to Simon here, the Westchester County Planning Board basically suggested, we're of course very happy, I'm sure you all were, with their basic recommendation is that they felt you should move forward and adopt the comprehensive plan and the zoning amendments. And the planning board said the same thing, and they had one a very specific comment to make, and Simon can cover that. So I'll turn it to.
Right, thank you, everyone. Just one thought as I get started here. You know, what we tried to do was, you know, go through our notes from the in-person public hearing, where, you know, via Zoom, folks made their spoken comments, and also the various letters that we received, and pull out the substantive comments that could lead to a change in the plan. And we, you know, based on our work with all of you and members of the public and staff over the course of the last 13 months or so, tried to, you know, take our best, you know, sort of best thought at what a reasonable course of action was. And that's what this memo is that I think you received on Friday. You know, in some cases, our suggestion is no change really needs to be made. You know, based on where we thought, you know, all of you might be. In other cases where we think that a change is reasonable, and we've tried to outline that here. What we think could be helpful here tonight is, as I go through this, if you all agree generally with what we've described on a particular comment, we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, right? We can just move on. But surely there may be some where we've taken a crack at an idea and you think we ought to do something a little bit different, and that's absolutely fine. That's why we're here. And those are the ones that we think we ought to spend some time on and discuss. So with that, we can go through. We've got an outline here of what's included here, the public comments made, and then the written letters. So during the public hearing, we've got a bit of an outline here of the general comments that were made. The one thing I'll note, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. You all were there. There were a lot of comments. In fact, the most common comment that we heard was a concern about allowing multifamily or increasing density in the T district. This is not something that is included in the zoning that's before all of you. So I just wanted to highlight that it was a concern expressed. We don't think it's something that is included in documents before you. I just wanted to clarify that. But as we go down here, proposed revisions, we sort of outline what we suggest here based on these different recommendations. There were comments about supporting the historic value of downtown Ossining. There are some ways that the form-based overlay code does that, we think. So we didn't think that there needed to be a change there. There were comments about allowing, folks disagreeing with allowing parking in the front yards. That's something that you all had already removed from the proposed zoning code changes. So we don't think another change needed to be made there. Other comments that we thought were supportive of in principle, the form-based overlay. So we didn't think a change needed to be made there. The comments about property taxes and the need for, sort of different economic development approaches. Some folks talked about, do we need to attract more residential or should we really be attracting more commercial? And we don't think a change is needed here because what we've tried to do in the plan is strike a balance between what these different types of uses in the village need from each other. A stronger downtown or neighborhood commercial market in the village in some ways is dependent upon the residential base that you have and to some degree bringing in new residents. So there's a balance there that needs to be struck, we think, in order to boost economic development in ways that support the village.
Can I pause you here, Simon?
Sure, please.
Can you explain what the first bullet point there means? Note that the plan. I'll read the whole thing. Note that the plan should recommend a parallel initiative to address unsafe / substandard housing.
Yeah, so this was from the prior page where it was, from up here where I'm outlining other comments that were made.
Oh, I see.
And there were comments made during the public hearing about, properties that are not code compliant and residential units that are, maybe overcrowded or not up to code. Where we address that is here in this last item that I was just getting to. We do have a recommendation in the plan for more consistent enforcement of building code violations. I think that addresses the comment. And the zoning recommendations, both in the plan and in the zoning code updates, are a separate issue from the concern about illegal units, units that have been subdivided without the proper certificate of occupancy. That's a code issue. The zoning code it's a building code issue. I'm sorry. The zoning code as is or the zoning code as proposed to be revised isn't really about the question of unsafe or substandard housing. Not that it's not an important issue, right? It's an issue that relates to enforcement of building code violations. And so this bullet point up here at the top of the page really relates to this item here, which as we explained, we agree, right? I think as we've talked about, there is a need for the village to to find the right strategy of enforcing building code violations to mitigate those issues, and that's something that we talk about in the plan.
So just so that I'm clear, so these comments are because we've gotten comments about both the zoning zoning code changes and the comprehensive plan, and so you're combining both of those comments here. Is that right?
Exactly right. These were back onto page 1 here. This is a brief summary of our takeaways from the public hearing, and during the public hearing, folks weren't necessarily saying comment 1 is about the plan, comment 2 is about the zoning. It was really about, here's what I think about the materials that I've seen. we try to apply, a response to, either the plan or the zoning. The one example is the letter from the planning board, which I'll talk about in a moment. It makes one specific recommendation that's specific about the zoning code updates, and it's very clear that that's where that comment goes. A lot of the other comments are more general and are better applied to the plan, or maybe they're, in some cases there might be a way that they impact both. But we've spent so much time on the zoning with you, with the exception of that comment from the planning board, which I'll talk about in specifics in a moment. We weren't going to backtrack on on all the work that we've done with you on the zoning. So a lot of the comments are more appropriate to the plan.
Right. And so what we're doing here right now is we're responding to the public comments about the plan and the zoning, but we're not really, this is not really the point where we're giving our feedback about the plan, right?
Well, Omar, let me add back to the other document I've got here, and Frank sort of went through this, but our item 1 here is basically the document that we sent to all of you on Friday.
Oh, got it.
The public comments.
Yeah.
Have we interpreted these the right way, and is our thought on the best way to respond correct, or do you want us to take a different approach? And item 2 here is, what are your changes to the documents? If your ideas come through as we're talking through the comments, that's fine too. But we were just thinking through what are the the 2 buckets of comments that we know we need to get through tonight. It's what we heard from the public, and it's what all of you have on your minds.
Let's stay on track. I appreciate the separation of agenda items. I'm happy to focus on this. Thank you.
So those were the sort of the our approach that we thought based on the public hearing. Generally a lot of comments that either were supportive of what was in the plan, or in the case of the one that Omar highlighted, raises a real issue, but it's covered by a recommendation that we already we think it's covered by a recommendation that's already in there. The next, so then into the written comments. So there was a letter from Westchester County Planning Board. This is, typical practice where a comprehensive plan is referred to the county planning board. They provide a letter. I think the high level important a response here. There are nuance. There are changes that they recommend, and we'll get into that. Is item 1. They believe the plan is consistent with their policies, with countywide policies, and they encourage the village to adopt the plan. So that's always a great thing to hear from the county, right? You don't want to hear them say you need to go back to the drawing board, and they've not said that. In fact, they've encouraged, they've commended the village on your work, and they've encouraged you to move forward. So there's no revision proposed. That was a nice comment from the county. The next item is about affordable housing. The county makes a recommendation to remove the fee in lieu of affordable housing payment that the village has on the books. We don't agree with this. We think that if you didn't have that, it would take away flexibility that you currently have in your toolbox for providing affordable housing. If all you did was require or encourage inclusive zoning, in other words, providing an affordable housing set aside in new development, which is a fine thing to do, but it's more expensive per unit than a fee in lieu, which allows you to build up a fund, which you currently do, in order to support your voucher program and other affordable housing policies. So this is one where the county recommended it. We don't think it's the right approach, so we've recommended no revision based on this recommendation. Okay. Item 3 from the county is essentially complementary about the focus on climate change. So we don't have a proposed revision there. Number 4, the county recommends considering, parking management practices, charging other fees. You had a whole presentation earlier tonight that went into much more detail than we did. We just, as an aside, we have met with Nelson Nygaard a couple of times through the process to make sure that we weren't saying anything that was contradictory to what they're saying. They get into much more detail. So we don't recommend any revisions here to what's in the comprehensive plan, although you could certainly get into the into greater detail based on the Nelson Nygaard report with regard to parking regulations. There is a recommendation from the county on protections for historic structures. This is something that we've talked about with all of you in development of the plan and the zoning. The specific concern is that the form-based overlay could result in demolition of historic structures. There is language in the form-based zoning that we inserted at, I think it was at the recommendation of the trustees to protect against that. But one thing that we recommend here, here's a proposed revision that we think is worth looking at. There's an existing strategy in the form-based overlay to include protections for locally landmark buildings. We can expand that. The county also recommends that the village study the areas that are included within the form-based overlay districts and catalog architectural resources. Essentially to build your knowledge base about what the what historic structures exist that should be protected, and make sure that they are protected in the event that someone comes in with a development application. So that's something that we thought we could do to be more specific about how historic buildings can be protected within the overlay districts. The county has a section on county sewer impacts. The first one is essentially they recommend that the village charge a fee on new development to upgrade sewer lines. We don't recommend that you do that. That could be perceived as an impact fee. Residents are already paying for sewer, county sewer in their taxes. The other one is county recommends a program to inspect sewer laterals from private homes for leaks and illegal connections. We understand that you're already doing this, which is great, and we thought we could add some text to clarify that in the infrastructure chapter. So it's a minor change just to recognize work that you're already doing. The county recommends some small changes to the language in the plan on shuttles, last mile shuttle service options from the train station to other parts of the village. We thought it was generally good language that we could add, working with ride-sharing companies as one option. And they also recommended not just talking about, I think now we're relatively limited in talking about connecting the waterfront to the downtown. There's other parts of the village that that could be connected as well. So reasonable change there. The county recommends adopting a bicycle parking ordinance, which is something that we could add to an existing strategy in the plan, or something that you could consider doing in the future. The county talks about green building technology. Similar response here is that in the text of the plan itself, we could recognize these options. Considering adopting the state's green building standards. We do talk about a strategy to adopt flood mitigation design guidelines, which the county mentioned. One thought that we talked about with staff was including some examples from other municipalities that you could look to. So you have some guidance about how to do that if it's something that you decide to do going forward. And another addition is potentially recommending that the village consider requiring new buildings to incorporate green infrastructure in the future. That's one thing that we could add. And then the final comment from the county is about universal design, which is a concept about new development being more inclusive for people with disabilities. Essentially going above and beyond ADA, right? ADA is the floor. Universal design is a way that folks talk about going beyond that and being more inclusive. And it's something that the county recommended. It's a good idea that we could include that. It's something that the village considered doing or encouraging during the site plan review process. That's the letter from the county. Like I said, very overall, this was a good letter. Again, they recommend adoption, so that's a good response from Westchester County. The letter from the planning board, we were able to review a draft of it earlier this week. There was one specific, and I didn't have it in this memo when we sent it out on Friday. So we're very general here, but there was one specific recommendation in there in the zoning code, which is to reduce the side yard setback from the property line to a driveway from 4 feet to 2 feet. And that would make it easier in the T district and the S75, where the zoning includes a recommendation to reduce those side yard setbacks to recognize how those lots are more narrow. Reducing the setback for a driveway would allow you to get a driveway in that side yard. So that's one recommendation, specific recommendation from the planning board.
By the way, just to add, it is a recommendation that I think makes sense. I don't want to speak for Jaime, but let him speak from his point of view of his experience in the village. But it does make sense in terms of what you've gone with in terms of the side yard. In other words, the minimum side yard is 8 feet, but in the T zone and the proposed minimum side yard, and then the side yard remaining, which would have a driveway, is 12 feet. And I think what the planning board spotted is there's a current provision that requires that driveway to be 4 feet from the side property line. So that effectively, it makes the 12 feet, you take 4 feet away, and you only have 8 feet for the driveway. That's too narrow. So what the planning board spotted that, I think it's a very good recommendation that they caught a mathematical issue there. A driveway should be at least 9 or 10 feet wide. So if the planning board's recommendation were taken, if you accepted that, then you would be ensuring that, driveways really are 10 feet and you've got enough, you've got enough in that side yard. So that's their key recommendation. And I think you all got their letter. I think Stuart sent it around to all of you. So that's the key recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, in conversations with Joe and with Stuart, it's kind of been common practice in the past anyways, when people came in for variances, that they were granted side yard variances and allowed to move the the driveway closer, sometimes all the way to the property line. So it is kind of helpful, I think, from our perspective, and also, I'll let Joe and Stuart speak for themselves on their history with this problem, but it would just make things a little bit easier for us moving forward to deal with this ongoing issue of side yards for driveways.
Real quick to touch on that, being that I have sat on the zoning board and, Joe was there too. A number of the variances that came in front of us with the zoning board was, parking and where they could park. And when I was there, yes, we have granted 0 lot line. But the 2 foot makes a lot of sense. When I read it, I'm in favor of it. It probably will alleviate a lot of appearances to the zoning board, so if they've got that extra 2 feet and they've got the room, it makes sense. It's just on a clerical thing, it makes sense. But Yeah, we have granted that before, so it's just saving a step.
And I think it was kind of encouraged by the zoning board that they would grant the variance, that the main factor was to, as long as the parking wasn't directly in front of the building, even if it was in the front yard, but it was more to the side, to the property line, they were willing to grant those variances. I think it was only really an issue when they proposed to put parking directly in front of the actual structure.
Joe, what do you think of that?
I think that's actually a good solution to it, because in a lot of the single family zone districts, if you know, there's not really parking permitted overnight on the street anyway. If you go to Narragansett, if you go to Indian Village, so even though those lots may be larger than some of the others, some do have difficulty meeting those setbacks to be able to get parking on their property. And today, where people have multiple cars, they have their kids driving, husband and wife, it becomes an issue to try to be able to get these cars on their property. The T-zones are a little different, because I know most of those districts do allow parking overnight. But, a lot of those properties are narrow as well. If you take Tompkins, they're very, State Street, there's a lot of properties where there's very, very narrow lots. And to put them to some of the current requirements on the driveways, they always will need a variance. So this really, I think, helps to alleviate some of the overnight parking issues. And I don't think it substantially becomes, something in the neighborhood that is unsightly. I think the goal should be is if they're along the property lines. There's a lot of properties that have shared driveways right now. So
how do you prevent the creeping into the front lawn? Because I see that more and more actually in Narragansett, where they were given the right to do the driveway, and all of a sudden there is like bricks with some grass in it, but essentially it's no different than paving in front of the house, in front of the it's this creeping sort of, they widen, and then they also create a little half a horseshoe in front of the house, which is essentially creating a driveway in front of the house.
Right.
Parking in front of the house. How do we prevent? How do we address that?
Yeah, I mean, if they're doing that, I mean, if we're reducing some of the requirements to make it somewhat easier, there should be less of a reason for a property owner to create parking directly in front of the house. And
so that still would not be allowed. So this would not
be allowed. No, that's correct. Okay. And if that's being created without going through the zoning board and getting proper variances, to allow them to do so, then they're in violation. It's on the building department to write those violations to them to correct that.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
And I just want to piggyback on all this other stuff. Sure. And Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Part of the variances that was granted in the past, it has been mainly to single family home areas. It has not been on a T-zone or two family. So I want to make that clear, because it was previous presentations, it made it look like we were trying to put parking in the front on the two family because there was variance requested, and that's not the case. That's actually this. I'm in favor, and that's something that Stuart and I had discussed this in the past. That was an oversight in my end. I should have included that, and for some reason I thought that was one of the changes that we were making. So I'm glad that they actually some of the members, especially from the planning board, they actually noticed this. But yeah, that totally makes sense. From 4 feet to 2 feet,
yep.
Especially because we are reducing the setbacks on the side yard portion. So yes, I'm in favor of that.
Great. Okay, let's keep moving. Don't mean to rush you, Simon, but I think I think we're getting agreements on this.
Yep. So the next letter was from IFCA. A lot of great ideas about housing and affordable housing. In some cases here, even though the ideas were good, we didn't recommend a change. Generally because we felt like the strategy and the plan now it might not be as specific as what IFCA is asking for, but it's broad enough to allow you to do what they're recommending, as well as providing some flexibility to take a different approach. So the first one is a good example of that. And I'll zoom in here. Strategy 8.1.2 is again about enforcement of building code violations. IFCA recommends a specific approach here, adopting a local law that makes it easier to conduct routine inspections. That might be one approach. We think that the strategy as written is more broad, allows you to pursue more flexible approaches. So we don't necessarily recommend a change here. It might be something that you could consider. The next one, they comment on strategy 8.1.3, which is about maintaining an inventory of affordable housing units. They are supportive. They think that this could be expanded to include all units. Again, we don't think that a change is necessary here. We do think that the village could explore partnering with IFCA or other groups to narrow in on the details of what goes into the inventory, what makes it easiest to update and maintain over time as an approach to implement the strategy. 8.2.1 on attracting new development. A similar thing here. I think IFCA read this as just affordable housing that has a set aside, for example, 10%. And is advocating that the village also look to attract 100% affordable housing developments. We think you're already doing that, for example, with the DPW site. And again, we think this strategy is inclusive of that objective. So we didn't think there was a need to make a change here. IFCA recommends permitting accessory dwelling units in single-family districts. They caught something that we do think there should be a change here, which is they sort of question, well, what does an accessory dwelling unit look like in a building that has 2 units? Does the ADU just make it a 2-unit building? So we thought we could clarify this and just focus this in on ADUs and single-family dwellings. I'll note here that accessory dwelling units are not in the proposed zoning code updates. So this recommendation would not affect the zoning. The one change that we could do here, as I noted, is in the plan to clarify it so that it's just proposing that the village could consider in the future ADUs in single-family districts, not in the 2-family or T district.
Yeah, and I would amend that to say that, and this obviously this is their recommendation. What I'm saying only represents myself here, but I would recommend that ADUs do be considered, but not in every single-family zone. So ADUs are probably not appropriate in an S50 zone or an S75 zone. But in an S100 zone where you have larger lots and you can accommodate any additional parking or anything above that, obviously it's different. There are standards that need to be developed over time. So this is not like a, figure it out right away kind of a situation.
I think that's the key, Jaime, I think we sort of try to cover it here by also saying, or some subset of zones. I think that question of would they be appropriate everywhere? Would they only be appropriate in certain areas? Are there other criteria that should go into how they could be approved? That's all to be determined. It requires more study, more outreach, more consideration by the board. And so, we think that concept is covered here.
So if I may, I'd like this to go back to not recommending revising the comprehensive plan. We asked for this to be removed. And I think it was a pretty strong majority vote of the board. We keep going back to it in different shapes and sizes with different ideas. In 4 or 5 years, if some board decides they want to look at it, they don't have to hire consultants. They don't have to redo anything. they could just look at this specific issue and deal with it. There was a lot of discussion about this. I think IFCA's letter actually had a lot of phenomenal ideas. For my recommendation, I would not like to make these changes or these accommodations. I really don't want to go through the whole discussion. It was a long discussion involving all of us. I don't want to rehash it, and I don't think this solves for it. People can change their mind. That's cool. I've got no problem with that. I don't want ADUs.
I'm sorry, Mayor, you're right. It was discussed, and I believe it was a majority about the ADUs to not see it, or to not see it for the future. If another board wants to deal with it, then fine. I don't know why it's back in front of us, because I think we explicitly explained, because I believe it was Frank saying that, oh, well, if you could put it in for, and we were like, no, we don't want to see it. So I agree with the mayor 120% on this.
And just as a point of clarification, we went over that, yes. And part of the explanation, and Frank, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we remove a lot of the stuff on the DGIS process, but because this was recommendations coming from the steering committee, we needed to include it in a plan. So now, that being said, this is, to me, this is just an introduction of what we had sent out to the public for review. So we, the board, have the opportunity in our next meeting, or whenever we go back and say, this recommendation should be out, this recommendation should be out, this other one should be out, we want to modify this, we want to update some map changes on the whole comprehensive plan. That's the opportunity that we have to clarify a lot of the what was just said now. Did I say that sort of in an okay way?
Well, you have the opportunity to actually change it right now, I think.
So what I heard in the beginning,
that to be removed, then
what I heard in the beginning of this conversation isn't that we have to address every single one, but I heard Simon say, and I think Frank did, we got 13 responses in writing. We got county, we got IFCA, we have a single, because it was in a single format about the Arcadia. They went through the list. And then they said, tonight, what we want to do is, it seemed to me like saying, are we on the right track? We're recommending not to change certain things, to change. We want to read through it. Is that okay? And that's what they're doing. I think some of this stuff, we're going to go back. I might sit down and put a little bit more thought and say, I'd like this change, I like this added. But for tonight, what I thought was, generally speaking, what Simon said, did we get the mark about right? Did we get close enough for our recommendation? We just went through the county, and now we're going through IFCA. And so far, I've sort of sat there, and I remember the conversation. I said, yeah, you guys, I think, you got it. This is, and I think your recommendation, makes sense to me. I'm going to go back, cup of coffee in hand, and go into detail. But tonight, yes, we can, I guess, legally or in policy, actually say yes or no's, but I think we were asked to sort of look at it, and I think, Manny, you're right. I mean, you're both right. Jaime is also right. We can say no. This particular one, Simon, I don't believe that it's reflective of the input that you've received from board members in the past and conversations in the past. I think it was very clear that the direction was different. And so on this one, I stopped it because I don't believe that you hit close to the mark of the input and conversations that we've had over the past number of months. And in this particular case, not that you're arguing with IFCA. You're not arguing. It's their recommendation.
Yes, you're correct, Mayor. I was going to say, here's one that's an example, I think, of where you may want to take this out. We may want to drop strategy 8.2.2. I think Manny summarized it well. And Manny, I think you're completely correct. You asked us to take it out of. This is not in the GEIS.
Correct.
So the GEIS does not anticipate any zoning action in favor of this. And now, as Manny said, previously this was a recommendation of the committee, of your advisory committee, but now you have the opportunity to modify this. So if you wish to drop this strategy from the plan, and I think that was what a majority had kind of indicated. Now you just let us know that decision, and we can do that.
And we could also do it by next week, is what Manny
Oh,
said.
yes. Oh, yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, nobody's saying if we can do it tonight. Doesn't mean we have to. I
No.
simply paused here because until this moment, I felt like, you know, I'll give my input. Everybody else will. I know a couple of people are sitting around this weekend together and they're going to look at things with fine-tooth comb. That's what I think that's the right thing to do. I'll be doing some of that. Everybody might be doing it differently, but on this one, I don't think you hit the mark. I don't think that you got the input in the discussions that we've had. And I think we should go on. I don't think you have to delete it at this moment in time. It's just feedback as we go forward. And I think we can move on. I just wanted to bring that to the forefront.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you have feedback, though, feel free to give it to us because, you know, then it helps us
Right.
Make revisions to the plan. Yeah.
We're not that shy, Frank.
No,
But so far,
yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
a lot of what you're saying and explaining, this is, you know, it's interesting stuff
Right.
going on here. And I think you put in a lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
And I know you keep saying the public input because I think that you are grammatically correct, but I do recall that in the beginning you did state we're talking about 13 involvements, if you will. It's not hundreds. I mean, I'm sure in some communities there might be 300-400, and some there might be 3. So I really appreciate your perspective and that you framed things from the beginning.
So the next one here is about, again, still on the IFCA letter, is about
Correct.
strategy 3.1, where the plan talks about allowing 2 family units as of right in the 2-family district and 3 family units by special permit. IFCA's comment here is really to, it's again back on the question of, is the zoning code promoting or enabling or facilitating creation of substandard units that are not up to code? And I would just reiterate again, these are sort of 2 separate issues. If someone is following, but not only the zoning code, but also the building code, I think this is a separate issue about units that are either, you know, predate current building standards or you know, were converted or overcrowded outside of the building code standards. So we don't think that this is, again, not that it's not a real issue. We think it's covered by another strategy in the plan, but we don't think that there's a needed revision here.
Yeah, but they're pretty much on the mark. It's just I think your understanding of the bigger issue is also on the mark.
Absolutely, absolutely. In there. The next one here is the strategy in the plan about creating the MF3 zone. If IFCA is in favor of the concept of having this lower density multifamily district, they have questions about where it would go. What uses would be allowed, how it would relate to properties that they currently own. I'll just note here again, as we've talked about before, this is a recommendation in the plan, not in the zoning for this new zone. We think that the locations, if this board or a future board were to look at this and think, this is something that we should do, that we need, it requires additional study to determine exactly where it goes. We didn't get into that. And so, you know, we think IFCA's, you know, their concerns are reasonable ones. They're ones that would require future study. We don't think it's something that that requires a change in the plan right now.
Okay.
So that's the IFCA letter. The next written letter here is a letter from Willing Biddle from Erstat Biddle Properties, the firm that owns the Arcadian Shopping Center. He spoke during the public hearing, but also submitted a written letter that went into additional detail. You know, generally, his concern is that the same changing retail trends that are affecting Main Street are also affecting the shopping center. And he has some specific ideas about what the village could do in order to help counter those changes. We think the details need to be worked out over time and are going to require additional thought, discussion, public input. However, we think that it is important to acknowledge at least that Arcadian Shopping Center is an economic asset. It's getting down here to the proposed vision. that is under threat, just as other retail assets in the village. And the village should consider strategies to add flexibility in the future. We don't think that we are equipped right now to get into the details about what should that parcel become specifically. But the concept of, figuring out what the right tools are in order to respond to the changing retail trends is a reasonable thing to start to explore. So this is some text in red here that we think generally could be added to the economic development chapter.
So you would actually recommend a change that was never originally seen by was not in originally over that specific zoning area because it's the only place that we have a PC.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it's its only zone with 2 lots on it.
What we're really doing here, Mayor, is we have concepts in the plan already about the retail market is changing and it's going to affect the village's downtown and neighborhood commercial centers, and the village would do well by itself to start thinking about how to guard against that. And the thought here is just to broaden that concept out just a bit and highlight Arcadian Shopping Center as one of those economic assets that is a retail, it's part of your retail base, and just recognize that it's one of the assets that is going to be affected by those changing trends.
Right, and he was more specific that about multifamily and PC zone, but that's the only PC zone. And you're basically saying to think in a flexible way. Just remind me, does the Arcadian fit into the footprint of the downtown, or it's too far over?
It's too far south.
It's too far south,
separate.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so right, the downtown ends by Star Bethlehem somewhere, right? By the end.
It's pretty much you have State Street, Broad Avenue, Main Street, part of Central, and it goes all the way up to Highland Avenue.
Okay, no, that part I know. I never know where it goes down on the southern part.
Up to-
Okay,
yeah,
great.
up to Broad Avenue.
Okay, so
Those
they don't
streets.
fall under any of the downtown stuff. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. The next letter was an email from Adam Markovitz, who I believe he's on the HPC, but he was clear in his email that his comments were his own, not necessarily representative of the entire HPC. He made a few.
He's the chair.
He's a chair. Okay. Great.
But he's doing this not as a member. He's doing this as an individual.
Right.
That's how he characterized it in his email. So he makes a good point here. What I'm highlighting, that the plan currently makes a representation about the National Register that's not perfectly accurate, and so we're going to make a change based on his comments, to correct an error of fact. Let's see. The plan recommends in strategy 8.5.1 creating neighborhood preservation districts. He notes that this would be a good opportunity for different boards to collaborate in figuring out what those could look like. We think that's a great idea. That's something that could happen going forward. We don't think that it's a change that needs to be made to the strategy, but it's more about how the strategy is implemented.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at, respect of time, I think we can look at this and we can also take this home. We don't have to solve everything tonight, but I think I thought he did a great job, actually. Really, you could see that he was very careful about it. What I'm learning from all of this and what I've learned during this comprehensive plan and sitting at land use boards, not a comment about these bullets, but I think you've done a pretty good job, again, hitting the mark. But what pops out for me, and we need to figure out how to address it, is the idea of historical is different from preservation, is different from landmarked. So the county's comments about taking inventory of historical. So historical buildings are not the same as landmark buildings, and they're not the same as neighborhoods that are there are differences, and the words oftentimes get interchanged. So we should be looking at the comprehensive plan, make sure that these things are taken care of, especially when development occurs. We've had a couple of major instances where buildings were just left to rot and then had to be taken down and all sorts of stuff. Some are landmarks, some are historical. There's just such a different definition. And I think it comes out both in the county's piece and here. So something to think about as you guys keep going through this, to just check for the language, really, and make sure that what we're saying is what we actually mean.
Mayor, do you want me to go through the last couple of letters, or do you think the board should circle back to this? And
I don't want to speak for everybody. I'm not sure. I would like to just see the red parts, because if people read what they were sent, I don't think you need to read the letters. I think we should see what you're generally, to make sure again that you're in the ballpark. Sure. I would be looking for the red marks, really.
There's only 2 more letters, so we can.
Okay, let's just go to the red.
Yeah, yeah.
The next was a letter from Patios, who is one of the chairs of our steering committee. We don't have any proposed changes here. He was, generally encouraging of some of the issues that we discussed. He mentioned the planning board, the same planning board recommendation here, the reduction of side yard setback. Yeah. But apart from that, we didn't have any of those changes. And then the final one was an email from Robert Stava. Let's see. There was a similar comment about the balance between residential and business. I've talked about why we tried to talk about that balance before, so we don't recommend a change here. He supports preservation of historic nature of downtown. We think that we've tried to do that, so we don't recommend a change there.
The only thing that I would say, again, we were sent some of these things, is that he wants in the comprehensive plan, which if I recall in 2009 it did exist, more mention and a more serious mention of bringing in corporate entities rather than focusing so much on residential, and that's the first bullet. Our current comprehensive plan does not talk very much about encouraging corporations rather than small business, and obviously there's a difference. So I think that was his key. I read that as his key point, and it's in your first bullet. But that's something for us maybe to think about as we individually read it and comment on it, because that's actually a significant change in how we look at it. And I think that was his point, actually. He was looking at things from 30,000 feet up. I thought his look was not in the detail, but actually in the larger size.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Mayor, that really finishes, I think that was the last comment. So those are all the comments. And we thought if you wanted to go into anything else tonight, we're here to do that. But if you want to take it, and I know you have another, well, we're meeting with you briefly, I guess, on your legislative agenda, May 5th, just for the FGEIS. We hope you can, accept that for public distribution.
Right.
I have a work session on the 12th, if you wanted to, on May 12th, if you wanted to give us anything final after you've, as you said, you wanted to take it home. Or
well, I got calls from a couple of people today that said they'd like to take this, think about it this weekend, write it. I didn't get it from all the trustees, then everybody can do what they wish. And as I'm speaking, and as I spoke a little earlier, all the trustees are hearing me saying it, that some people want to take it home. I think a couple of people are going to work on it together. I don't know if I'm working on with anybody else, but I think that's legitimate, like that we can do that. So I don't think we need to spend more time tonight. But that's just me talking. Others, I'm sure, have a point of view.
Yeah, I have one thing. So I would like to revisit the piece that we talked about earlier that was in that one bullet point around that you said, Simon, was already mentioned in the plan around unsafe and substandard housing. When I look at the plan, particularly in the draft plan has on page 205 a section called overcrowding, and there's a couple of paragraphs, and then there's a couple of charts, and that's about as far as I see in the plan where it talks about this. But there may be more that I didn't get. Could you talk or point me toward where there's more around this topic in the plan?
So I don't have the full text of it in front of me, but the strategy in the implementation chapter is 8.1.2, which talks about creating a strategy for more consistent enforcement of building code violations. I think is the principal place where we address that in specific as an implementation action.
Got it. So here's the thing. I feel, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like what this is missing is some of the, I think this undersells what it is, right? So when we're talking about more consistent enforcement of building code violations, as a reader, it can sound like, oh, like maybe there's some folks that have like fire detectors that aren't working, or there's all kinds of building code violations that are that may be violations, but that from a practical experience don't make that much of a tangible difference. But there's a real issue that we're trying to address here. And to me, the language around housing exploitation more accurately gets to the real nature of it, so that it's not just there being unsafe housing or overcrowding in housing, but that there is a whole ecosystem of exploitation that starts with having a population of folks that are either low socioeconomic status, undocumented, or otherwise unable to have a lot of options when it comes to housing. There being a low amount of options in Ossining and Westchester County generally that are affordable, and then that creates an environment where slumlords can take advantage and skirt our building codes in order to create environments where people are perpetually stuck in housing that is unsafe, and creating it touches so much of our village. From there are kids living there, so from the education of kids here in our community, all the way to our first responders, because they're going into spaces that are unsafe, not to mention obviously the people that are living there, many of whom we have seen during this pandemic are also essential workers. And so folks that need to go out into the community to do their work, and whose work we rely upon in order to live the kind of lives that we live. And so I personally would love to see that section more beefed up, not only in terms of substance, but also in terms of the kind of language that's used to underscore the nature of the problem that when we're doing our work day to day as trustees, we hear about on a regular basis.
Yeah, maybe Omar, we could ourselves take, get some language worked up, maybe with Joe, with the building department, and also with Jaime, and expand that a little bit so that we get something back to you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Hey, Joe, quick question. Would implementing the fire inspector on a part-time basis, would that help us in, setting up, we set something up where there's annual inspections of these apartments or these 3-family houses that we know are suspect of all of this? Because it used to be back in the day, and it's kind of fallen off the radar. It would take it kind of off of your plate, so to speak, because the fire inspectors, they go in to inspect fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, CO detectors. Oh, look at this, there's a bed in the closet, and it gives us a foot in the door, because right now we don't have that foot in the door. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. We just can't knock on the door and say, oh, we're here to look at your place. Am I hitting the mark here?
We were running we were doing a fire inspection program. I mean, with when COVID hit, it kind of shut down the ability to get into apartments easily. But you know, we can get in and do fire inspections on anything that's 3-family and up. We can't get in on like 1 and 2 family homes. They have a right to basically not let us in, but the fire code allows you to do anything that's in what's considered in the building code, which would be 3-family and up commercial buildings. But even with that being said, we still have to organize with them because we got to get into the apartments. The landlords have to, you know, we have to notify them ahead of time. They have to organize that with all the tenants so we can get into everything. You know, obviously, yeah, there's a fire inspector as part of the team doing that. That of course would be, you know, something we'd always welcome. But as code enforcement, we are trying to do that program. It's just, you know, and residential apartment complexes are supposed to be inspected every 3 years. And some other types of commercial spaces can be, you know, inspected yearly. But yeah, I mean, the fire inspections will help on the buildings. It doesn't help us when we're in the T-zones. We actually depend on a lot of times, you know, sometimes we get in, sometimes we don't. A lot of it is our access into those into those buildings, or when the fire department or police department, they're on an emergency, and then they call us and we go out, and that's usually when we find the violations. You know, I will say that some of the like, I think the wording, the way it's said in the comp plan, is when they say more consistent. It is a little bit misleading, and it's, you know, something that I don't, you know, maybe there's a better terminology for it, because what I feel is like it's telling the public as though the code enforcement team is not consistent in doing what they're supposed to do. And it's not a matter of consistent. We can follow up on every complaint and check on any property that has, you know, issues or suspicion of overcrowding. The problem is somebody telling me how legally we can get in and actually visualize them, because as Stuart will tell you, if you can't visualize it, if you can't take photos of it, if you can't, you don't have a case. You can't build a case in the court that way. So it can't be based on assumption, it has to be based on facts. So I would look if anybody has strategies or ways, or if there's legal ways to put stuff into our local codes that gives us better ways of getting access into these buildings to do this, and consistently be able to, if we write up these violations, if they are actually upheld, that would be better. I don't know if personally, the wording to me of the non-consistent or getting a consistent enforcement is a little misleading, because I think between the fire department, the police department, code enforcement teams, it's not a matter of not doing this on a daily basis. It's being able to be effective in it.
Yeah, you know, just to kind of echo, I guess, not echo, but in reflection of what you're saying, Omar, and a lot of what the mayor says, you know, the village is people. It's an assemblage of people. It's not the bricks and stuff like that. And so when I can see how the language around code enforcement makes it sound like it's, you know, shingles falling off. And so with that in mind, and the discussions we're having now about putting together the code enforcement task force to bring the multiple departments together, has really been focused on sort of the lived experience of people and improving the lives of residents, you know, making sure that they're not taken advantage of, making sure that they're not, you know, subject to slum conditions, and making sure that, you know, if you don't have to deal with neighbors who are not taking care of their properties as well. So it's primarily focused on the residents rather than, you know, just talking about the buildings, which are our way of approaching the problem, but not the beneficiaries of the, you know, positive movement on code enforcement issues.
Thank you, Jaime.
I would just add, and I think you said it, Omar, and you and I have had a conversation of this that I agree with. So just the use of the words like illegal units, and the word illegal is correct. It's an accurate building description. It's you know, you can go to court with it, but the connotation is really for us. I think if you could reread some of the pages, it would be helpful. That's why Omar suggesting the word exploitive rather than illegal, because illegal oftentimes, and I did get a number of emails after some public, which I found a little disturbing, because there was the immediate parallel to illegal immigrants or illegal people, and why are you supporting that? So it isn't that it is an incorrect, grammatically incorrect word when you go through the plan, but I think we're saying, I think Elmer is saying, and I would like to just echo, specific to that word, I actually find that not a great word. I mean, Joe pointed out to another word, right? So sometimes one word changes the feeling when you read something. And it was written correctly. We're just pointing out, I think, more of a thing that might set people off even subliminally sometimes, and send them down a path that I don't think you intended, actually. So if that could be looked at again with a few paragraphs that it exists in and refer to, it would just be appreciated.
We'll do that. And is there any other comment from any of the trustees, if you have time for, or we could listen?
Well, we will be seeing you again.
Yes, we will be. I was going to ask then, Mayor, I know it's late, so could we get hopefully just calendared? I think we've gone through everything that we wanted to tonight, but we need to just conclude with you all. We were wondering if we could get calendared for your next work session, which I think is May 12th. That would allow us, give you time to, as you said, read anything that you want to, and that way we could get your final comments on the plan and those changes.
I'm personally okay with it. I mean, I just, you know, because these are public hearings, that, well, they're open to the public, not necessarily public hearings. We have a lot of other stuff going on, so I just want to be, I'm trying to be respectful of so many other initiatives and projects that were all pointed out a couple of weeks ago, something like 12 to 18. So what is everybody thinking?
Mayor, if I might.
Sure.
If we cannot do this on May 12th as a sole issue work session, then you're going to have to do it as a special meeting.
Okay.
You have to go through the entire comprehensive plan to give BFJ your final comments so that they can produce the comprehensive plan. And if we can't, as I said, dedicate a specific work session, then I strongly recommend a special meeting where this is the only topic on.
Karen, do you recall what you have? You and I look at agendas a couple of weeks in advance, so this would be a couple of weeks, or maybe you guys could. Do we have to do this right now, Frank? Can Karen and Maddi look at the agendas for the next 2 to 3 weeks?
They can, sure.
We'll put together a recommendation based on the schedule, see what we can move around, or if a special meeting is needed, because I do agree with Stuart that going through the plan is going to be a, you know, it's going to be a time, you know, it's going to take time. So
my sense of it is that if you're able to, we've sort of highlighted things tonight. So we've been able to get through all comments that have been made. So now it's your comments. And so you all know what you want to.
Yeah, but we like to comment. You know us.
You
so
all like, so you know.
What can I tell you, Frank? You're not going to change that.
That's why we just recommended a special meeting, just to comment.
Well, I don't know about a special meeting. We have a lot of stuff going on. We're going to have a bit of a town hall meeting. So
well, what I was trying to just say, if I could very briefly, I think you're very, very close. We've just covered all of the comments that were just made. So now all we need to hear is your final comments, what you would like in the plan. And we'd be ready to go with the changes. So.
I appreciate that, Frank. But as the people that work with us every day, like Stuart and Karen, I think already clearly know that.
Yes.
We'll see. You never know. You never know. So listen, one of the things I would just ask Frank and Simon and Sylvia is one of the things that could be helpful to work with the staff is if there's things we can prepare in advance so we're not sitting that night and going through all that. If there is, I don't want to call shortcuts, but if there's ways to look at things differently that might save us some time. If you
I really think
creatively think, just let us know.
Yeah, what we found in other plans with other trustees is you probably have something in your mind from, it's been before you now, you're familiar with it. It's have a few things in your mind and jot them down. And just, for that meeting, we can go through you know, all 5 trustees, what are your points? And then we make the
Okay.
changes and we'll be ready.
Great. Thank you, folks. Thank you,
Thank you.
Sylvia. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you very much, Simon.
Good night, everyone.
Anybody else? Last minute footnotes.
And hopefully you can
comments?
adopt the FGIS because it's all Sylvia's work. She's on the, she's on the.
Yeah. That doesn't. We love Sylvia, but that still doesn't work on us. But thanks anyway, Frank.
Okay.
Good. Well, listen. Thank you very
Great.
much. Very much appreciated. I'm
Thank
turning it back to the village manager for next topic, because do you want to go through the towing tonight or do you want to hold off on that? It is 10:36. And I think there's a lot actually in there. I mean, no one ever thinks towing would have been taking this much of thought, but it is, and I think it's well.
Well, Mayor, I know we have the chief here. I had written to you folks earlier today. I don't have a revised draft because there's some things to do. I did get some comments from both Bobby Nolan and from Ray Oakley. And they presented some issues and some things I think the board should consider as to whether or not, for example, you want to include that for retrieving the vehicles, the locations have to be open for certain hours.
So you do want to go through the towing tonight? You don't want to move
Well,
it
no,
to
well,
another night?
I don't have to. I mean, because let me put it this way, I've spent most of my day looking at towing legislation throughout the state. Pretty interesting, actually, what most of these places have. But there are things to work on. You saw what, as I said, what Ray said. You saw what Bobby Nolan said. What I'd like to do is be able to.
I also saw
sort
what
of
the chief
get
sent
together.
to us, the
Right.
data that he sent to us, which I thought was quite eye-opening, frankly.
Numbers,
So
yeah.
it's just that I'm looking at the clock now. I could have looked at it an hour ago and said to myself, maybe we should talk to the chief. He doesn't really need to sit here for the whole thing. But at 10:36, this is going to be a conversation, Stuart. So if we have to do tonight, yes,
No,
but
you do
otherwise
not-
it might.
You don't, because you have, there's no, the ordinance is going to get changed. So we're not there.
Okay, how's everybody feeling? I don't, you know me, I'm into like collaboration here. We can move it because we are trying to, yeah, Manny, please.
Mayor, no, and I'm okay with that. Obviously, I'm going to apologize to the chief for staying this lady if that's the case.
I know.
But, can we bring this over to continue business on next week's agenda? How the agenda looks like for legislative session? I guess that'll be my question.
I would ask not to, only because the changes that are going to be made to the local law that you've already looked at will be significant enough. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, that's
got it. Okay.
That's why I know the
Stuart.
conversation is going
No
to be
problem.
more than, look, on one hand, nobody thinks we should talk this much on towing, folks. You know, if anybody follows us, I'm going to be honest with you. It hasn't been looked at in, I'm going to say a couple of decades. Every couple of decades, you know, when you discuss something, you should do it correctly. You should take it seriously, and then you may not have to look at it for another couple of more decades. So I think it's worth the extra couple of minutes. I just think it's getting late tonight, and I think there's going to be conversation about it. So if everybody's okay, and I am sorry, Chief, I really thought about an hour ago we were still going to be able to do it, but it's getting late.
Okay.
So let's, and also I suggest we all read the stuff, because I think Stuart only sent us some information today, and the chief sent us data, which if you haven't had a chance to look at the data sent, Chief, did you send it just to me or to everybody, that data?
It was requested by you, so I sent it to you.
Yeah, you know what? Is it confidential? No, right? I asked the chief just for the whole concept of the 5 companies and the sequence, and what do you log when somebody says no and go to the next one, and how many? I found it interesting. I'll send it around. You don't have to do it, Chief. I'm going to send it around. You're right. I asked for it. I just realized. I think you guys should look at that, because for me it was eye-opening, actually. It may seem silly, but it was actually. Thus, I am a big lover of data. Because it opens my eyes to a lot of things. So if we could hold this off so that we can actually have a conversation and not rush through it and stay here all night, I think that might be helpful. Okay, I'm getting a lot of everybody going like this. Sorry, Chief, I should have done this earlier in the evening so that you didn't have to hang out here. Okay, thank you. Stuart, is there? Nope, we're good. Karen, next.
If we're not doing that, then we are ready for adjournment.
Okay, we're adjourning for advice of counsel?
Advice of counsel, correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that requires somebody to make a motion to
moved.
adjourn for advice of counsel.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ladies ladies and gentlemen, 10:40, and we are concluding this meeting. Have a wonderful evening and join us next Wednesday at 7:30.